going through the motions and hearing them out and understanding what they've gone through is oftentimes discriminating for genders, right? Because women are oftentimes, or more often than not, the victims of sexual abuse. It's actually 1 in 5 women on a college campus is going to be the victim of sexual abuse, which is
a staggering
terrifying.
number.
Yeah, and oftentimes sexual abuse is like widely underreported, so that number is probably even higher.
Yeah.
But I want to mention out before we go into the rest of the story that men are also the victims of sexual abuse, and it's about 6%. Okay, so 6% of men are victims on college campuses as well. Now, Title IX, as I mentioned, is that federal law that prohibits discrimination based on sex, and so it includes this protection for sexual harassment, like I said. Now, in 2011, the Obama administration outlined the guidelines for schools on how to handle sexual assault allegations in the memo that's referred to as a Dear Colleague letter, okay? Now, the letter reminded schools of their legal obligation to address sexual violence amid concerns that schools were not taking the issue seriously enough and called on schools to step up investigations of reports. It also provided guidelines for investigations and hearings. And I think one of the most notable aspects of this Dear Colleague letter that I think Betsy DeVos is probably alluding to in her rollback is this part of going through on evidence, right? And so instead of needing 75% evidence, in most of these cases, it's about 50%, right? A 50% chance, because in cases of sexual abuse and sexual assault, there's often not a lot of evidence, because if you shower after or something like that, you're going to be missing some of the evidence, or if you wait a few days because you're, concerned about retaliation, traumatized, whatever it may be, you won't have all of that evidence. But because the numbers are so staggering, and only about 2 to 10% of rape allegations are false, they say that you should sort of take those numbers into account in your proceedings. What do you think about this move from Betsy DeVos?
Well, like you mentioned, the numbers on of college campus sexual assault are just like absolutely staggering. It's like, I mean, I'm not a parent, but I can just imagine like looking at these numbers and like sending your daughter off to college, and you're like, this is a 20% or at least, or maybe more chance of my little girl being, like sexually abused. Like that's like a crazy thing to think about, that we're, sending young girls to be, educated like at our most hallowed institutions in the country, and they were basically sending them to this like sexual assault meat grinder. It's absolutely crazy. It's very clear that it's a very serious problem that requires some sort of action. And it's just like the conservative hypocrisy on this, where all of a sudden they care about due process, which they never do in any, like whether it's in cases of terrorism or
drug offenses,
anything. They do not care about due process ever. But in this particular narrow case, they all of a sudden become like civil liberties heroes. So it's very clear that the Trump administration, shocking, and Betsy DeVos in particular, like are not acting in good faith. Like, right, they don't really care about the problem. They're just sticking up for part of their base, right? This sort of like men's rights group activists and things like that. That being said, like it is very clear that it is such a almost like a wicked problem, right? I mean, because there's a reason why college campuses or colleges don't quote unquote take this issue seriously enough is because, like, imagine you're the first college that starts like seriously dealing with sexual assault. All of a sudden, like, your numbers look like, if you start investigating and you start to see all these cases of sexual assault, and all of a sudden, like, your college might get a reputation as being like the sexual assault college. Right. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's like a perverse incentive for them not to investigate, so that so it doesn't seem like it's actually going on.
Right. And that was the incentive then, but then after this Dear Colleague letter, basically the Obama administration said, we're not going to give you money, we're not going to do these things if you do not follow these guidelines. So then there was an incentive that almost flipped
It's almost
the
like we need to see like instances of like reported sexual assault like uptick in a certain college campus as a good thing, if that makes sense.
Because more people are reporting and feel comfortable reporting.
That means that they're doing something right in terms of dealing with the problem. The other problem is that schools aren't, they're not criminal investigation centers or whatever. Like, they're not law enforcement. They don't have those tools necessarily. Like, so they probably may need some sort of funding program or something to develop the institutional ability to deal with something like this, because they clearly don't have it at this point. They're just not built for that, right? So it is a really thorny issue. Rolling back this is like obviously like the exact opposite thing of what they should be doing. They should be doing more to deal with the problem. They should be like looking into further government programs, new processes. I mean, it's a very, very difficult situation that requires a lot more to be done. I don't necessarily have the answers. I'm not a criminologist or an expert in how to investigate this, but like doing less and reverting back to the status quo is obviously like an unacceptable position. I mean, these numbers are just like too staggering. So.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, and I think that maybe is the answer, right? Is keeping the Dear Colleague guidelines, but adding on to it, right? Like I think adding on aspects of education, right? Yeah. Where both genders are educated in what sexual assault and sexual abuse looks like, what to do if this happens to you, like maintaining evidence and things like that, and how to sort of deal with that. But also, like, we need to change the culture around masculinity and power dynamics, where this isn't sort of like, oh, he got drunk and whatever sort of thing, and we need to change that. And
I think that's a good point, because like everything that I've ever learned about sort of criminal justice would tell me that, you know, harsher punitive measures around a certain crime don't necessarily reduce the instances of that crime. Like there is something to be said about like just like overall justice, and just, you know, like, you know, a crime deserves, you know, some sort of punishment just as a fundamental sort of theoretical case.
Yeah, and a little bit of emotion too.
Right.
Yeah.
But if we're actually trying to sort of reduce the problem, whether it's drugs, whether it's murder, I mean, like, you know, we have the most punitive criminal justice system in the world, probably. Yet we don't have fewer murders. We don't have fewer instances of sexual violence. We don't, you know, all these things, you know, they don't necessarily have an effect on the actual crime. The only way we can sort of have an effect to reduce crime is to programs of rehabilitation to reduce recidivism rates, and general, like you said, changing the culture, changing the you know, education, empowering women, empowering men. You know, like really educating men. I mean, you know, the perpetrators of this. I mean, obviously there's a, you know, million, you know, sort of degrees, and like there's like the full on just kind of like, you know, sinister behind the dumpster kind of rapist. But there's
like date rape.
There's probably some that maybe don't quite realize what they're doing. You know, if that makes sense. Like there's it runs the gamut, right? So we could probably eliminate a huge chunk by educating men. Right, teaching them, like, you know, these certain things are not okay. Like it's just not okay. You know, like, which maybe sometimes now they do think it's okay.
Right, and you know what I mean. Like I think understanding what's not okay, right, and understanding what is defined as that is helpful. But also like saying like, oh, if somebody's under the influence. They cannot give consent. Even if you're both under the influence, they cannot give consent. And I know that seems really frustrating to people, because they're like, wait, we were both drunk. But at the same time, like, there is a power dynamic that's intrinsic, unfortunately, in heterosexual rape. And so those things need to be taken into account. Yeah. And so we do need to sort of be educated on that. And I think if men and women alike are educated on that, then maybe we'd like reduce some of this, and of course changing the culture of masculinity, I mean, obviously, and how people exert their masculinity or their power, or whatever it may be, and feel like I get drunk and I eat a lot of nachos. Like, I'm not trying to pin anybody down, except for guacamole, but I think that's part of the, like, how I was, you know, brought up and things like that. And some people don't have that benefit, and so they may act out when under the influence, or with like, a partner or something like that, where they feel they have more freedom.
When you got to college, had you been around alcohol before in your life?
I had been around alcohol, and I was very educated. Like, my mom has told me since, like, I think I was like 9 years old, like, watch your drink, like, whatever. But I will tell you, as conscientious as I am about those sorts of things, and careful as I am, and not getting like blackout and things like this, like, I was roofied in college, and I'm extremely.
I was roofied once too.
Really?
Yeah.
So like, both of us extremely cautious, like educated around these things, and you can still
obviously, I mean,
be in that situation.
There's obviously like the roofie cases, but there's plenty of cases where it's just like, you know, we got too drunk. I just remember when I got to college, you know, I was raised by European parents, like a very different culture around alcohol than I realized coming from, you know, sort of quote unquote like regular American upbringings. When I got to college at Boston College when I was 18, I remember being shocked at like all these people who had like never touched a drop of alcohol before in their lives, and you know, got to college and all of a sudden it was like they went from like nothing to like free for all, and that like transition was just like, I mean, so many people like right out of the gates were just like, blah, 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 you know, like they just couldn't handle it. Whereas like, you know, me and like maybe my group of friends that we got there from, you know, from our upbringing, like we were like totally much more comfortable, and it's like as if we'd all like been there, done that, you know, kind of thing. So I think having a conversation, you can't have a conversation around campus sexual assault without having a conversation about alcohol on campus, and like obviously. Banning it's not going to work. I mean, the kids get around it all the time, but like just the way you educate around, the way you create a culture around alcohol, it's like slightly different, like a more just tame one. But like now, I mean, like what's like the most celebrated thing is like, you know, like who could do like a longer keg stand and like, you know, 2-floor funnel and, you know, things like that.
You had a fun college experience.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you that I think alcohol is a part of it, and I don't necessarily like want to put all the blame on alcohol, because then I think like we take some of the culpability away from the perpetrators. Like I still think that you are culpable and you.
I'm not suggesting that's. I mean, obviously.
Okay.
It's like adding like
fuel to the fire.
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe it's the same for sex. Frankly, like if you haven't like been as active in high school and things like that, and then all of a sudden you have you know
again
what I mean?
another argument for increased sexual education instead of like abstinence only. You know, like I mean, there's like a billion. That's what I'm saying. Like we keep as we're having more factors are like putting into the spoken wheel. There's no one thing that will eliminate this. There's like a million things that we need to be doing.
There's a million things that we need to be doing. They all sort of like lie within education. And I don't think that the solution to all of these things is rolling back protections for victims and saying that their assailants can still be like in class with them. I mean, this is for some people triggering and traumatizing, and will from most people that are the victims will affect them for the rest of their lives and will haunt them for the rest of their lives. And so by taking somebody out of their classroom to allow them to just like get through the day is I think beneficial to both parties, right?
Well, obviously, you know, I mean that's the thing. Like instituting due processes and instituting sort of a coherent and thought through process by which to deal with something like this, it actually probably even helps the quote unquote accused assailants more than than something like this where there is no, it's just like the wild west, you know, like if we had some more coherent thing. I mean, like obviously like the number one priority should be to protect the victim. And like I mean I think that should be like an uncontroversial thing, like okay, like we're at least gonna like
make sure that you're okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, like, this is beneficial to if the guys, if they do perpetrate the crime, and then they're like, okay, it's like, no, you can't come to school until this person graduates. If you rape somebody in the real world, like, you're going to prison for years and years and years.
Well.
So, unless you're Brock Turner.
No, or unless you're one of the 98% of like unreported rape cases or whatever.
That is true. That's a good point. Yes. Well, at least
if you rape someone in the real world, you're probably going to get away with it. Unfortunately,
a little sooner.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think about this rollback from Betsy DeVos. And a lot of you guys are on college campuses, so I want to hear from you guys what the culture around sexual assault looks like, how you've seen your school deal with it. Let us know in the comments down below, and we'll see you guys soon. So late last week, new research out of Stanford University suggests that a gaydar might be on the horizon. Now, Dr. Michael Kosinski and Yulin Wang, whose research will be published by the journal Personality and Social Psychology, say that AI can distinguish between the face of a heterosexual man and a homosexual man in 81% of cases. For women, the predictive accuracy is 71%. Now, they said they're able to guess correctly in 61% of cases for men and 54% for women, and that the advanced computer analysis compared different facial characteristics and found that gay men and women tended to have gender atypical features. This included fixed features such as the shape of one's nose or jaw, as well as transient features including hairstyles and facial hair. Now, the scientists then tested this idea to measure the facial femininity of each image and the probability of that face being female. So the results show that the faces of gay men were more feminine and the faces of lesbians were more masculine than those of their respective heterosexual counterparts. Among men, the data-driven measure of facial femininity positively correlated with the probability of being gay. So this is, I want to make this really, really clear that we are reiterating the research that came out of Stanford University. Now, there's been a lot of backlash to this research, and I think in a number of cases, rightfully so, from the LGBT.
It's just like, I mean, imagine like being a scientist, working at Stanford, like one of the most elite academic institutions in the world, and like spending your time trying to figure this out. So, like, of all the problems there are in the world, I don't know. Like, it seems like it's like I want to develop a gaydar.
That's essentially what it is, right? And so people who are arguing against this are like, okay, now this could be used to target people within this community, right? If we have this AI. Stanford's point, the researchers from Stanford's point is, yeah, so we're letting you guys know that this is possible so that we can protect you in the future if people try to employ this in a negative way.
It sounds like one of those like in a bad like sci-fi movie where like the scientist creates something just to warn the good people of whatever, but then like the thing itself like gets out there and like
now it exists, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's a few problems with this besides being like, yes, it could be used really detrimentally, right? Especially as we are seeing more backlash to the LGBTQ plus community, and having this sort of AI, if people do not want to like come out or something like that, is really dangerous and scary, right? I think the other component of it is like, I feel like when people hear about like new technology or intelligence or something like that, they all of a sudden think like, well, if that exists, like maybe I could be a pro. And I don't like the idea or the concept of people trying to pick out people's sexuality by the way that they look. That I think is very problematic. And so I really want to get into some of the methodology that these researchers use, because they only used really pictures from one online dating site, and the majority of them were white men. So it's not a representative sample size at all. Additionally, like there's gonna be
scientific method. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like there's no diversity there, right? So it can't be representative that way. I think it was like 71 faces or something like that. And then the other component of it is like, I wonder what sort of dating site it was. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think especially within the gay community, there are different dating apps that have different proclivities or whatever it may be.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And so you don't know, it could be like another sort of filtered out sample.
That doesn't represent the entire gay community or whatever.
Exactly. And so like I just think that, and then like talking about like how their faces might be more feminine, it's just I'm struck by like the need to like dedicate, like, I mean, being a scientist, like, you're in a lab and you're working and you're researching and you're doing all this stuff, and like you're you're working toward this goal. Like even if like, imagine a universe in which like this thing was like totally sound in the sense that it was like whatever, like that it was totally representative and perfect accuracy, in this fantasy world. Like, what's the point? Like, really, what's the point of like dedicating your life? So he argues that then we can prove that it's nature, not nurture, and it's not a choice that you can change.
But they just said that like some of these like some of these are transient features.
Yes.
So I'm not buying that argument. I'm not buying that argument.
Saying, I know.
Also, the other thing, the broader point,
yes,
is that we should stop all AI development now because they're gonna kill us all. The robots are gonna kill us all.
Take over. It's a really
there is no alternative.
We won't have to worry about this gaydar when
we have bigger problems when we're all just like enslaved, you know, to the robot, you know, overlords. So
it's a really good point. They're going to be able to use their AI to see that you're not a robot and that you're a human.
Yes.
And they're going to target you that way. Let us know what you think about this research out of Stanford, and if you agree with the researchers that it's important to put this out there, or do you think this is really damaging to the LGBTQ+ community, in the comments down below, and we'll see you guys soon. New research out of Stanford University suggests that a gaydar might be on the horizon. Now, Dr. Michael Kosinski and Yulin Wang, whose research will be published by the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, say that AI can distinguish between the face of a heterosexual man and a homosexual man in 81% of cases. For women, the predictive accuracy is 71%. Now, they said they're able to guess correctly in 61% of cases for men and 54% for women, and that the advanced computer analysis compared different facial characteristics and found that gay men and women tended to have gender atypical features. This included fixed features such as the shape of one's nose or jaw, as well as transient features including hairstyles and facial hair. Now, the scientists then tested this idea to measure the facial femininity of each image and the probability of that face being female. So the results show that the faces of gay men were more feminine and the faces of lesbians were more masculine than those of their respective heterosexual counterparts. Among men, the data-driven measure of facial femininity positively correlated with the probability of being gay. So this is, I want to make this really, really clear that we are reiterating the research that came out of Stanford University. Now, there's been a lot of backlash to this research, and I think in a number of cases, rightfully so, from the LGBT.
It's just like, I mean, imagine like being a scientist, working at Stanford, like one of the most elite academic institutions in the world, and like spending your time trying to figure this out. So, like, of all the problems there are in the world, I don't know. Like, it seems like it's like I want to develop a gaydar.
That's essentially what it is, right? And so people who are arguing against this are like, okay, now this could be used to target people within this community, right? If we have this AI. Stanford's point, the researchers from Stanford's point is, yeah, so we're letting you guys know that this is possible so that we can protect you in the future if people try to employ this in a negative way.
It sounds like one of those like in a bad like sci-fi movie where like the scientist creates something just to warn the good people of whatever, but then like the thing itself like gets out there and like now it exists, right? And so I think there's a few problems with this besides being like, yes, it could be used really detrimentally, right? Especially as we are seeing more backlash to the LGBTQ+ community and having this sort of AI, if people do not want to like come out or something like that, is really dangerous and scary, right? I think the other component of it is like, I feel like when people hear about like new technology or intelligence or something like that, they all of a sudden think like, well, if that exists, like maybe I could be a pro. And I don't like the idea or the concept of people trying to pick out people's sexuality by the way that they look. That I think is very problematic. And so I really want to get into some of the methodology that these researchers use, because they only used really pictures from one online dating site, and the majority of them were white men. So it's not a representative sample size at all. Additionally, like there's gonna be scientific method. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like there's no diversity there, right? So it can't be representative that way. I think it was like 71 faces or something like that. And then the other component of it is like, I wonder what sort of dating site it was. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think especially within the gay community, there are different dating apps that have different proclivities or whatever it may be.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And so you don't know, it could be like another sort of filtered out sample.
That doesn't represent the entire gay community or whatever.
Exactly. And so like I just think that, and then like talking about like how their faces might be more feminine. It's just
I'm struck by the need to like dedicate, like, I mean, being a scientist, like, you know, you're in a lab and you're working and you're researching and you're doing all this stuff, and like you're working toward this goal. Like even if like, imagine a universe in which like this thing was like totally sound in the sense that it was like, you know, whatever, like that it was totally representative and perfect, you know, accuracy, you know, in this fantasy world. Like, what's the point? Like, really, what's the point of like dedicating your life?
He argues that then we can prove that it's nature, not nurture, and it's not a choice that you can change.
But they just said that like some of these like some of the transient features.
Yes.
So I'm not buying that argument. I'm not buying that argument.
Saying, I know.
Also, the other thing, the broader point,
is
that we should stop all AI development now because they're gonna kill us all. The robots are gonna kill us all.
Take over. It's a really
there is no alternative.
We won't have to worry about this gaydar when
we have bigger problems when we're all just like enslaved, you know, to the robot, you know, overlords. So
it's a really good point. They're gonna be able to use their AI to see that you're not a robot and that you're a human.
Yes.
And they're gonna target you that way. Let us know what you think about this research out of Stanford, and if you agree with the researchers that it's important to put this out there, or do you think this is really damaging to the LGBTQ+ community, in the comments down below, and we'll see you guys soon. Vanity Fair released their best dressed list, and now they are facing backlash because I wasn't on it.
Yeah, I know, Hannah Cranston.
Jeans and graphic tees didn't make the cut this year.
I think you are a style icon in my book.
Thank you. I feel like I just really like zhuzh up my yoga pants. You know what I mean? It's like a little extra pizzazz.
Yeah.
But on the list, former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
Others who made the list: Solange Knowles, Rihanna, Harry Styles, LeBron James, Justin Trudeau, and Emmanuel and Bridget Macron. Now, you might notice that a current First Lady is not on this list. And Melania Trump supporters are peeved, and they are calling the magazine Vanity Unfair, which...
Clever. I mean, they're clever.
I live for puns, and so as much as I think this story is really fucking dumb, I love that.
Yeah.
That's really great.
Yeah.
And they cried fake news. Vanity Fair best dressed list. News necessarily, but whatever floats your boat. So let's read some of these responses. Southern Mom says, not having Melania Trump on best dressed list is pure spite. You know as well as I do, she is best dressed, period. Hashtag best dressed. Vanity Fair can't quite grasp the concept of class, elegance, beauty, intelligence, all in one package. Definition, Melania Trump. At FLOTUS. Okay, just when you think the fake media couldn't get any worse, Vanity Fair doesn't.
Right, like it's like this is the biggest crime.
This is it. Doesn't put FLOTUS Melania Trump on their annual best dressed list.
Okay.
What do you think about this?
So, a couple things. I just find it like hilarious now that like Trump, you know, people are like, you know, these like fashion experts, and like this is like what they care about, you know, like this is like their cause celebre is like, you know, like fashion. Trump and his family are the best dressed people like in the world. Like that's just like it's hilarious to me.
Those ties are the best ties.
They're very
made
good. He
in
tapes
China,
them,
whatever,
and
but
they're like
the
way
best
too
ties.
long. But I will say this, that they maybe have a point. I mean, Barack Obama is not a very well-dressed man. I've seen those dad jeans, you know, and you know, like it's not. He's cool, but he's not like a very good dresser, in my opinion.
Okay.
So I don't think he belongs on the Vanity Fair list.
I think you're bitter.
Why would you say that?
Yes, so maybe they didn't have like I can understand being upset with a. No, actually, I lied.
No.
I was gonna say I can
it's like
understand
not.
being
Who cares?
upset as the best dress list, but who the fuck cares? Like, unless like you personally like are on the worst dress list.
Okay,
like,
but
maybe
I'm gonna put you on the spot. Do you think Melania Trump is a good dresser?
I think the people that dress her do a good job.
What?
I think
You're
she's
reducing her agency?
I think the people that dress Michelle Obama do a good job as well.
Okay.
Like they don't dress themselves. Do you know what I mean?
They don't?
No, they have people that give them dresses and they get dressed, which is great. Good for you. If you have the money, so do half of the people on this list. Most of these people Rihanna, Solange, like they all have stylists that dress them. It's not these people like up in the Gap picking out these outfits and like piecing it together. Let's be real. It's the stylists that give them the clothes. Fine. I think the stylists that give Melania her outfits are lovely. I think her outfits are lovely, but Vanity Fair doesn't owe it to anybody to put Melania on a list. And
I just find it so funny that like, you know, like this is like the kind of thing, you know, like it's like, you know, conservatives are like, oh, triggered much? You know, like, oh, you need a safe space and you be politically correct. Like they want all those same things, you know, like. This is the pinnacle of snowflakeism. Yeah, they're like. You didn't put Melania on our best dress list. Like, calm the fuck down. So conservatives, you're the real snowflakes. Bernie wasn't on this list. Like, Bernie, we don't see the liberals, my favorite story. Hannah, do you remember my favorite story last year was when Balenciaga released their like line and it was like Bernie Sanders inspired. Remember, it was like Balenciaga like 2016 in the Bernie logo. Oh God, it's amazing. That is amazing. I missed that. I think you need to calm down. Yeah, there's like real fucked up things happening in the world right now, and not having your first lady on a best dress list is one that maybe you should just let roll off your shoulder. You know what I mean? Also, we all know that the best dressed is Barron. Yeah, he's got that. You had like a cute the fidget spinner. Yeah, he's a cool kid. Yeah, he is a cool kid. Yeah. Free Barron Trump. Let us know what you think about all of this hubbub around the Vanity Unfair list in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys soon. Hey guys, welcome back to Think Tank. Hannah and Nando here, and today we're going to talk about toxic masculinity, and it actually comes from the dialogue of a clown. Now, very in right now. Bear with me. It is very in right now. Yeah. Hot movie. Yeah. Hashtag trending. So let's jump into this and read this tweet because it actually is very powerful, and I was actually moved by this, moved to tears. Really? Yeah, I will tell you that I was moved to tears from this tweet thread. So let's go through it. At Bogus Press said, "Hey everyone, I'm a clown," which is a funny way to start a tweet thing. Yeah. But like you know, everybody's got to make a living. And I just got back from face painting at a picnic, and here's my take on male violence in America. It starts young, and it's more than just letting boys play with guns. It's how we shame them for feeling anything that isn't anger. A 4-year-old boy asked me to paint a blue butterfly on his face. Then his mom told me, no, he doesn't want that. The boy says, butterflies are beautiful. He said that's what he wants. Shouldn't I paint what he wants? No, give him something for boys, the mom says. She turns to the dad, a big guy in a jersey, and says accusingly, do you want your son to have a butterfly on his face? He says no. Which, cool, let's bring your husband's masculinity into it too, because your 4-year-old kid needs to know that his father would be ashamed too. I really tried, you guys, but this woman was so scared of her son wanting a butterfly, she made me paint a skull and crossbones on his cheek. When I finished the skull, I said to kiddo, you want a little blue butterfly too? He nods. Mom interrupts, you didn't ask me. I say, in my kindest fuck you voice, oh, I'm sorry, I thought this was for him. She said, I'm his mother, you need to ask me. Sorry, I say and wave goodbye to the kid, and I am. I'm sorry that he isn't allowed to love something as miraculous and beautiful as a blue butterfly. This story is very sad to me because whether it is a commentary on male violence in America, as this clown illustrates it as such, I think it's more of a commentary on gender stereotypes and feeling the need to sort of fall within a certain category and like certain things when you are presenting as a certain gender. And whether or not this kid identifies as boy or girl, whatever, like, you should be able to like blue butterflies even if that's deemed a girl thing by some power that established that as a girl thing for no apparent reason. Like, you know what's so interesting is caterpillars, boy thing. Are they? Are they like any of the thing? Like, well, they're like more
or boy. You know, it's like, oh, pick up the bug. But as soon as it like turns into a butterfly, then it's a girl thing. Whatever. It's just, it's so stupid.
Yeah.
And it's just gonna like F up this kid that you can't like these beautiful things, that you have to like the skull and cross. Like, that's a dead person on your fucking face.
Well, I think two things. So the interesting thing, one is that it's the mother furthering the stereotypes, right? Like she was like seemed to be the most like adamant person in this whole scenario. But I will say this: like, imagine if you had a child and a clown was like,
and telling you
how like you know, and like kind of like subverting your kind of like wishes as a mother. Like you'd be like, clown, get away from me.
Yeah.
You know, like I get away from my 4-year-old.
Let's swap it, right? So if the boy came up and said, I want to
a skull and crossbones.
Or no, like I want to look like a Ninja Turtle.
Right.
Okay? And the clown was like, but don't you like really want to look like a princess or something like that? The mom would be like, what the fuck? But like the kid wanted the blue butterfly.
No. I'm not saying that the broader point is incorrect. I'm just saying that I do think I find it strange that a clown would want to, or anyone, not just. I don't want to say like I don't want to say like it's just because it's like she's a clown, but like or anyone that would like, you know, kind of really try to butt in and really be kind of parenting someone else's child. I don't know. Like I always. Everything I know about parenting is like when you have like a child, especially one as young as 4 years old, like you want to like it's your thing, you know, like not anyone else's thing.
And I don't think this mom is like malintentioned. She probably is good intentioned, right? She probably like wants her son to like fit in more and conform more so that he isn't made fun of, whatever. You know, like little kids are mean sometimes.
That'd be so like I mean, like you can imagine like a scenario in which she's just kind of like worried about like maybe protecting him in some way, as misguided as it may or may not be. Right. You know, like you know, she wants to avoid him getting bullied or whatever. Yeah. But the broader point I think is correct that you know we do live in a. But I get
that a clown like informing your parenting would be a little annoying.
Yeah.
I'm with you there. It just makes my heart break for all of the boys who are told like not to like certain things because it's not boy enough.
Yeah. Were you ever told that you weren't allowed to like something because it was too boy enough as a kid?
I was told by kids that I wasn't like I would go and I would try to play soccer. Like during recess, and the boys would be like, "No, like this is a boy sport. You can be a cheerleader." But that just shows.
Even though in America the girls are better than the boys at soccer. American girls win World Cups while the men are terrible.
Yeah, very true. But the young kids are like, no, girls do this and boys do this, and that's very sad to me. You know what I mean? When you think about like how that's probably changed so many people's trajectories in their lives, but also made people feel really not comfortable in their own body. And so I do think that even though this is sort of like an isolated incident and whether or not a clown should be telling a mother how to parent or not is a different story, but I do think we need to change
the broader
the
point
culture
the broader point
around
stands.
gender stereotypes.
Yeah, the broader point stands.
So we're here to tell you today that like your blue butterflies, put them all over your body and just love it.
Butterfly tattoo on my. No, I'm kidding. I don't.
All right, then. Let us know what you think about this tweet thread and what you think or where you think Nando's butterfly tattoo is in the comments down below, and we'll see you guys soon. So if you're looking to spice up your sex life, you might be looking to maybe some chocolate sauce, another person, maybe some handcuffs, I don't know. But researchers have discovered one thing that will actually make your sex life better, and it is music.
Oh.
Now researchers at the Max Planck Institute I really appreciate that you pretended to be shocked even though I gave you the story ahead of time. Like the acting there was
I'm like Meryl Streep over here.
Yeah. Wow. I'm just like, I need a minute. You know what I mean? Like, it was just really believable.
I know.
So researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Human Cognitive and Brain Sciences in Germany conducted a series of experiments in which participants listened to music.
Those freaky deaky Germans, they probably just put like a bunch of David Hasselhoff on these people. Things got really sexy then.
As a robot simultaneously and discreetly stroked. I don't know how.
That's creepy.
A robot discreetly, like,
just
how do you not notice that a robot's
Cranston. I'm going to stroke your arm right now.
As like what a lederhosen music is playing or something like that in Germany. I don't know. I'm being stereotypical. Now, participants' reactions demonstrated that the sexy music, all tunes were rated on a sliding scale as to the level of arousal they evoked, from not at all sexy to extremely sexy.
Boys to men.
Was linked to increased tactile arousal, regardless of whether one expected to be touched by a machine as opposed to an attractive human.
Hello.
Researchers believe that the same emotional mechanisms that govern how we perceive auditory inputs affect how we perceive touch. For example, aggressive music would be interpreted much like aggressive touch.
Maybe you're into that.
Sexy touch. What do you think about music in
the bedroom?
In the bedroom, in the boudoir.
Well, I think it's good. I'm pro it.
Yeah, you're pro music.
Yeah.
I'm anti-music.
You're anti-music. You like silence.
Yeah, pure silence. Not pure silence. Like you can make
noises.
You can speak to each other, one another, but the music is very distracting to me. Yeah.
You don't think it gets you into the rhythm?
No, because then I feel like, well, I don't need to get into this, but like I feel like if you're trying to like get with the rhythm of the music, then it's like you're like kind of dancing, and then you're just like I'm laughing.
And like
you know
what if like the song changes, then you're like, wait a minute, you know, like
like it's just too much. Like I need to be free flowing. I can't have music like holding me down. I can't, because then I'm gonna try to hit the beat. You know what I mean? I'm a slave to the rhythm.
Right. Let the rhythm take you over. But Hannah, you have never had a robot stroke in your forearm.
You don't know my life. I think maybe if a robot and I don't. What is some sexy music? I'm trying like Bruno Mars. Like Bruno Mars.
Bruno Mars, he's very sexy.
Sexy music and a robot.
Very white. Very white, sexy.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's got like that low voice. Listen, baby.
Yeah, I feel like I give this a little bit of credence just because like sometimes when I'm in the car and I'm listening to like Bruno Mars. No, what's the Bruno Mars like? It's just like a gorilla or something song.
Gorilla? What are you into?
Yeah, no. I think that's what the song's called. Now I have to look it up. Yeah. So when I listen to that song in my car, I'll look up the lyrics for you. It's very dirty, and I honestly,
very dirty.
Like I have to change the channel because I feel dirty in my car. I'm like, oh my god, people are driving by. It says you got your legs up in the sky with the devil in your eyes. Let me hear you say you want it all.
Say it now. Say it now.
We're banging on my chest, bang bang gorilla. Like they're making, and the people are. You just smile and tell me, "Daddy, it's yours." Like I feel dirty.
Bruno Mars is doing like a gorilla move while he's having sex.
Let's not judge other people.
In the second line, he says he's got a cocaine kicker, so that does sound like a cocaine. Like, like Bruno Mars doing. Oh, Bruno Mars got caught doing cocaine in the bathroom in Vegas.
30 feet tall.
Yeah, this is more of a
giantess thing.
This is more of a cocaine song than a sex song, I think. Like.
Well, either way, I don't like listening to it in my car.
Right, because you get a little hot and bothered.
I just feel like if people are listening to this, that they're gonna overhear and think that I'm like doing weird stuff in my car. I don't know. I try to listen to like normal music. Like, look what you made me do in my car, so people know not to fuck with me.
Tay-Tay?
Yeah. I don't know. So I'm curious. You're pro music.
I'm not like a music absolutist. I don't need it.
But I also feel like if you're like in an apartment building and you're like blaring like let's get it on, everybody's up in your business.
No, but sometimes you need music to drown out the other noises from the neighbors. Do you see what I mean? Like you're almost doing the neighbors a favor. I mean, have you ever lived next to like a loud neighbor? I have.
Oh yeah, I had a roommate, but it wasn't like loud. It was just like the bed shaking.
Yeah,
but music's not going to change that.
It will change like moaning sounds. You might drown out that kind of stuff.
Just let people do their thing. I think it's.
I'm not like calling the cops on these people.
Sex is a beautiful thing.
I'm not calling the cops on people. I'm like, if you're my neighbor, be as loud as you want when you.
Better than playing gorilla.
Yes. Don't bring a gorilla home because that's dangerous. They will literally rip your face off.
Let us know if you guys think that sexy music makes you feel more sexy.
Or if you're into robots touching you.
Or if that. In the comments down below. And we'll see you guys soon. you are sending in a resume, you're supposed to put all of this information about your schooling, your past work. Sometimes people put like their past times to add a little je ne sais quoi. But there are apparently some things that you should really leave out of your CVs. And we got these from employers on Ask Reddit. Things like weight and height. For real, this is for a call center, not a call for models. Have you ever like attached a photo or put your weight? I mean, I guess it's a little different.
Well, I have to say that a photo I find helps. So when I've definitely been in hiring. No, I've definitely hired people. You know, and I've had to hire like a large amount of people very quick. No. It's just like it helps like get like a. You know,
put a name.
You know, like because when you're getting hundreds of resumes, you know, like you need to be able to.
How are you supposed to pick the hottest? I don't know.
No, I don't do that. But I mean, I think research shows that like you know employers are more likely to hire someone that you know that they can like visualize.
Yeah, it's just like if you're like doing a job like behind a desk at a computer or whatever it may be, and you're not like in our industry where like your face is people. Whatever, like you don't really need your weight, height, or photo.
No, you don't need your weight, height, and you don't need your weight and height, obviously. But like, just like literally, just like a face to be able to like, okay, oh, this person. See, when you're sorting them out, like, because if not, like, you get you get like lost in the shuffle of like, you know, you can have like a brilliant resume, but they all kind of look the same. They're just like.
Are these just headshots or are they full body, Nando?
You're gonna get me so much trouble.
I'm sorry, I can't help it. All right, let's move on to the next one. This is according to this guy's wife. Stupid fonts. She said she once got a 4-page CV in Chiller font. Not a great angle if you want to work at a school. In case you aren't familiar, Chiller is the serial killer.
What does that mean? I don't buy that for a second.
Chiller font.
What like all the serial killers are getting like together on the phone, like you know, guys, we're gonna start using the
this
Chiller
is a
font.
little serial killery.
Sure, I guess, but like it's like they're not like
serial killery. Just use like Times.
New
Helvetic
Roman
has a lovely one.
Yeah.
Arial.
I do find that in CVs.
Comic Sans?
No, Comic Sans is gross. Injecting some sort of like honesty, or you know, like not just making it like a clinical like 3 to 5, you know, 3 years at this place, you know, like.
You want like, hey, I worked here, but like I wasn't really good working here.
Whatever.
You want more
you know,
honest, like
something like.
Spent most of my time in the bathroom playing video games.
No, not that. You don't want to do that. But I remember my sister applied one time for a job at BuzzFeed, and she did her CV in the style of like a BuzzFeed post. And I thought that was very clever.
That's cute and clever.
Yeah,
that's
it was
great.
It was very clever. And I was
Good
like, she did like a whole design thing, and I was like,
that's
you know, like,
cool. Yeah, I guess
I remember thinking like that's the best CV I've ever seen in my life.
And it depends on the type of job, I think.
Yeah.
Like if
you're like a computer systems analyst or whatever.
Center, like maybe not. But if you're applying to something artsy like that, or like graphic design,
well, but
you
even
can show some of your work.
But a call center is like a good opportunity maybe to be creative and like maybe do like some sort of audio element to your CV. You know, being like showing that you
should give this people
have
advice
like
for a living.
you know be a little creative with your CV. You got. I mean, there's like sometimes people like I mean. You know, we live in a neoliberal hellscape where everyone's competing against each other, and you know the jobs are disappearing. You know, unfortunately, you know, whenever there's like one good job opening, there's thousands, if not tens of thousands, of CVs thrown in front of like some person's face. You know, you gotta figure out a way to stand out somehow.
Yeah, it's true. So we go back on when we said use Chiller font and threaten them maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
Just like a little bit.
I will kill you and your entire family.
Yeah. Maybe that'll help you get a job. The next one, hobbies. Okay, so like talking about yoga, wine, and Netflix. Maybe not a great one.
Was that you?
This is from me.
Yeah.
This really resonates with me. But if you're gonna talk about hobbies, talk about things that are a little out of the ordinary, that'll make you stand out a little bit and maybe have something in common, right? So
I'm into live action role play.
Or like if you're like rock climbing or something
rock climbing.
Like I have a friend who really likes Betty White.
Dungeons and Dragons.
So she puts Betty White on her.
That's smart. But that's smart.
And people love that.
Yes, that's a good idea.
Every time she's in an interview.
Humor in a CV, I think, is always because any job, no matter what job it is, you know, security guard at whatever, like any job, you know, people like to be around funny people.
And people like to be around people they want to like. People choose people they want to be around because they're going to be sitting next with you.
I will say this as a person who has done a lot of hiring in the past. CVs are highly misleading, and
sometimes the photo that he gets doesn't match the person. Sorry, I had to. Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Go ahead.
But you know, my dad gave me a piece of advice one time that I thought was incredibly wise, which is surprising coming from him. No, I'm kidding. I love my dad. He's the best. But he said, never hire resume, hire character.
Oh, I love that.
And to be honest, that has borne out 100%. That resumes are overrated. Experience, like, because like if you put say like
hardworking.
Yeah, like say for example, like, you know, someone seems like to have like this great experience, like they worked at some great company on some great thing, you know, like, but like you never really know what they actually did there or how much they actually contributed to that success. Maybe it was successful in spite of them. Maybe it was maybe it was just successful and they were just kind of like there.
Yeah.
So you never really know. But if you always hire people with good character, no matter what, they will be able to help your organization in some way.
That's very good advice, Nando.
Thank you. Do not put that you are an avid amateur gynecologist on your resume. Don't do that. Just don't do that. Don't tell anyone that you're an avid amateur gynecologist. When you're on a date, don't say that. When you're
what does an amateur gynecologist mean?
That's like from
that's just I'm a hobbyist.
That's like Jason Segel's character in Knocked Up. He's an amateur gynecologist.
I don't remember.
I wonder if that's a reference to that.
Maybe. That's terrifying. Okay.
Loves delivering a good pap smear.
The next, you know what's real? No, I'm gonna go on a tangent. But it's so bizarre to me that like that's like there's people out there who like want to be in that position. Like being at the gynecologist is very important for your health, and you really need to go do it.
Yes, I go
But
every
at
day.
the same time, like it's not like a sexy experience. Like your legs are in stirrups, like they're like with a flat. You know, like you don't want that. It's not like I'm there. I'm like, oh, I'm getting healthy, but I'm not like.
Oh,
you know what? Like this
sorry,
guy.
I didn't realize you were such a kink shamer.
Cute, yeah.
I didn't realize you were kink shaming all the people that are into gynecology stuff.
You can't be into gynecology. That's like saying like I'm really into like optometry and that turns me on.
Hey, there's people out there, you know.
Like
you never know.
Oncology, like that's a fucking weird ass thing to be into.
That's pretty morose, yeah.
Yeah, like no, just like no ology. It's just like you can be into whatever you want, but falsifying your medical expertise as a means to like get in somebody's pants, not okay.
Yeah, not okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Or in their eyes, if that's what you're into. If the optometry, like I don't know.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Lastly,
ear, nose, and throat doctor.
Grammatical errors. Spell check is built in. Use it. Also, look for things spell check won't catch. Like stalker and stalker are two very different things.
They are very different things. That's true. You don't want to say that you're a stalker.
Yeah.
On your resume.
Right.
Word of advice.
Well, I wouldn't. What are other like sort of like ones like that are like really close? Like if you like don't finish writing like analyst or something like that, you could become into trouble. Where it's like still a word, but the spell check might not catch it.
Well, I'm just thinking like stalker and talker. Like if you're, you know, like I'm a good talker.
Yeah, and you accidentally add the S there. I mean, dangerous territory. Yeah. Guys, let us know if you've ever put something weird on your resume that somebody called you out for, or if you've seen a resume and somebody put something weird. Let us know about those in the comments down below, and we'll see you guys soon. Last week, we covered the squiggle brow, and both of us had major feels about that.
Yes.
This week, we have some breaking news. There's a new trend on the scene, and it is the McDonald's brow.
Have it your way.
And so this all started on the Huda Beauty Instagram, and she did her brows like this. So essentially what she did here, you can watch the full video on her Instagram, is she used like glue stick and powder to cover up her brows and then drew in her own brows, similar to what Nando was doing.
If you're trying this at home, very important, do not shave your eyebrows off.
Yes, please do not.
Because that takes a long time to grow back, and you look weird.
Also, like, I wonder, I mean, I worry about gluing your brows, too. I worry about putting glue on hair. Do you know what I mean? Like, that scares me.
Did you have a traumatic experience as
No, but I get waxed. Like, I know what that shit's like. I don't want to do that here.
Yeah.
That seems like it would hurt.
I got waxed once. Yeah, I don't want that either.
Yeah? This picture of another McDonald's brow, she really got into the feathering of the brows.
Yeah.
Really.
Wow.
And I like that she added a little accessory. You know what I mean?
Yeah, bunny ears.
She's really getting in the mood. No, those are McDonald's ears.
Oh.
It's a bizarre thing. Like, it's just really high arch brows. Like, let's not give McDonald's all of the credit.
Yeah. We're giving them free advertising.
Yeah. This girl went full on McDonald's. I want to know, like, when these...
This is a joke, right? It's kind of a joke. This is not like a real trend.
No, I don't think we're going to see people in Vanity Fair's best dressed list wearing McDonald's brows. But you never know. Like, I feel like every single day, we've talked about this before, we're just getting closer and closer to the Capitol and Hunger Games.
Yeah.
And, like, maybe capitalism will get to a point where you do your makeup to fit your favorite brand. Like,
that is like the end point.
Like the
that is the
swoosh,
the logical end point of
or something. I'm trying to think of, like, what my favorite brand is. I don't know what my favorite brand is and what I would do. I like Apple. And I like eating apples, so maybe I've already succumbed. I don't know. But these are all a little interesting. Creative. I'm trying to put a positive spin on it. Out of this one and the squiggle brow, which do you think you'd be more likely to be
attracted to?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say observer of, but you could be attracted to them as well.
Squiggle.
You would be attracted to the squiggle. And which one would you do yourself?
Squiggle.
Wow.
This one looks very weird to me. It's very unsettling. Something about it's like very unsettling.
This one looks like very first one looks like somebody who just had like teensy too much nip and tuck.
Too much nip and tuck. Yeah, she looks like I was gonna throw a reference that you would never get, so I'm just gonna abandon it. But yeah.
Maybe they'll get it.
Well, if you've ever seen the movie Escape from LA, when they go to like the plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills, it looks like that. No one's gonna get that reference.
Kurt Russell made that up.
Kurt Russell.
Let us know if you think you would try the McDonald's eyebrows. Maybe you have a different fast food chain. I don't know what Chipotle's thing is, but maybe you want to do your brows like that, or Taco Bell, or
Taco Bell brows.
What are other? Oh, you could do Carl's Jr. or what is it called on the East Coast? Hardee's, where you do a star. I don't know. Do your thing, and let us know what that thing is in the comments down below. And we'll see you guys soon.
Hello and welcome to Murder with Friends, the show where two friends get together and talk about the darker sides of history. I'm your host, Grace Baldridge, and I'm actually going to be going out of town starting tonight. I'll be in South Dakota and North Carolina for a comedy festival, but Amir and I still want to make sure you guys had some new content from Murder with Friends. So Amir has joined me today in the Murder with Friends studio, and we're talking about a case, really a series of events in American history that we've been fascinated for a while, and we really wanted to cover. Initially, I wasn't sure if it qualified as a murder, but doing some digging, it definitely does.
There's some murder in there, yeah.
About the Donner Party.
Yes.
And I don't know if you guys have any familiarity with what the Donner Party is. It was a part of history that took place during westward expansion. Amir, can you explain to someone who has never heard about the Donner Party before a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today?
So they were amongst the hundreds of thousands of people that were going to the West in the 1840s and beyond as part of Manifest Destiny. So they were a party of around, in total, I think, they reached a party about 90 people with around like 80-something wagons. And while most people took the Oregon Trail to get to the West, they decided to take another route.
And what these people were looking for was opportunity. They were looking for a better life. These were people that gave up everything to try and find their destiny out west, this uncharted territory. And that brings us just to our first clip to explain a little bit about the time period with which the Donner Party took place. Let's take a look.
some walk 16 kilometers a day for up to 6 months, going through 10 pairs of boots on the journey. Half are children, 1 in 5 of the women are pregnant. Families sell farms, saving for an average of 5 years to join the exodus, risking everything.
I think if there is one episode that encapsulates the American spirit, I think it is probably the move west. Whip those mules and horses and cross those rivers and cross over those mountains to the unknown and say, I'm leaving everything behind. I'm leaving everything that I know behind to reinvent myself.
Something that Amir and I point out when we were watching that clip was a lot of the clothing that they are wearing on this journey is what we would consider now sort of dress clothing. It wasn't like they were doing this journey in their best athleisure wear.
Yeah, like vests and like
boots made
slacks.
out of, like hard leather, and wood boots. I mean, these weren't the ideal sort of materials. They were working with the best of what they had.
And they would walk thousands of miles without any foot support in those goddamn boots.
Yeah, so it's 1846, and the Donner Party, which you said about 90 people, they set off from Springfield, Illinois, and they are headed west, really with the destination being California, but where in California sort of was yet to be determined.
Yeah, it was mostly Northern California at this point because there was still the Mexican-American War going on, and people were really uncertain about the territory in Southern California. Yeah, so it was Northern California, and then also there was the promise of maybe gold and discovery out in Oregon and California. They were led by brothers Jacob and George Donner. And the crucial mistake that comes with the Donner Party and comes very early on in their story is the decision, instead of taking the road most traveled, they decided to pull a Robert Frost and take the road less traveled. And they took what was recommended by Lansford Hastings, who was a 27-year-old lawyer with a very grandiose vision for his future. He thought that maybe he would rule what would become a Californian republic. And he was the trail guide traveling a little bit ahead of them. He'd published a book sort of saying that it was the emigrant's guide to Oregon and California. And in this book, he says, quote, the most direct path would be to leave the Oregon route about 200 miles east of Fort Hall, thence bearing west-southwest to the Salt Lake, and thence continuing down to the Bay of San Francisco. Mm-hmm. He's saying that there's this cutoff that you could take. And however, he hadn't even done it yet. Yeah. This guy wrote this book, and he sort of said you could try it, but he didn't even know it was to expect. Yeah, and on top of that, the parts that he did try was just by himself on horseback. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really meant for an entire party of wagons to even try this. Yeah. And look, on paper, it looks like a more direct route, and you can see it in the map that we're showing right now. But on top of them taking this cutoff, another important thing to remember is that they started their westward expansion at the latest possible time that you should do it. So they had very little margin of error to get to California before winter hit. Yeah, because they left in May, I believe, and you're supposed to leave way earlier than that. They left in the spring. I believe they left end of spring. Yeah, and the end of April is when they set off on the road. So they had very little margin for error, and it was one of the biggest risks you could take at that time. We were discussing, there was a 70-year-old, she was the mother-in-law to the Reed family. To the Reed family, who knew that this would probably be the final journey of her life. Yeah, she had TB, she was 70 years old, she was part of this huge family of people moving to the West, and that kind of goes to show what the stakes were for these people, and they were willing to go do it. Well, and also what it brings up is that when we talk about the Donner Party, some people think that it was just a family of Donners, but it was many, many families. The main characters that we'll be talking about today are the Breens, Kesebergs, the Stanton, who came back, the Reeds, the Graveses, and Murphys, and then also the Donner family as well. So it started out as a smaller party, and this happened quite commonly while people were moving to the West. Along the trail, other people would join in because it was safer to go with a group of people. And by safer, I mean because you have more support system, you have more resources, and Native Americans are less likely to attack you if you're in a big group.
Yeah. So they would travel together in these big teams, but this group of this party decided that they would not take the Oregon path, and instead they would take Hastings Pass, which was really the crucial and the fateful decision for them. It's also just such a human desire. Like, I want to take the faster route, and I want to get there faster, and I know better, and everyone else is doing that, but I want to go my own way.
Yeah, and according to Hastings, whose cutoff this is, he claimed that it would save him 350 miles. And because they were leaving so late to begin with, that sounded like a great deal to them.
Yeah, yeah. So they make it through the Wasatch Mountains, and they arrive at the Great Salt Lake Desert, and the route that they have now taken, Lansford's route, has taken them about 18 to a month days. So they're already their supplies are depleting. It is not the easy path that they thought it would be. But once they get to the Great Salt Lake Desert, they think, okay, well, maybe the worst is behind us. And they elect to have James Reed, who is a character that we'll see more and more in this story, sort of pilot the expedition. But the desert is really, what bugs me about this story is that I feel for them so strongly, because you hear in their letters, and there's a really awesome website that I'll toss up a link below, where you can see all their diary entries of people that were within one of the parties or knew someone in the parties. They think that the worst is behind them, so that once they make it through the mountains, they think, okay, the worst is behind us, and now we just have to cross the Salt Lake Desert, and then we'll be, I think it was within like 150 miles of getting to what is it, Sutter Fort Sutter?
Yeah,
Sutter's
Fort Sutter in
Yeah.
California. So to go back a little bit, there was actually some conflict in the party between George Donner, the head of the Donner family, and James Reed, the head of the Reed family, who they were both vying to be the leader. And George Donner was actually the more favored of the two, because according to some of them, Reed was very autocratic in his leadership. Even though he was a military man, he was from America, they didn't like him as much. He wasn't a very likable character.
Some people described him as a little bit aloof,
yeah.
sort of smug, felt like he was a little bit better than other people,
Right.
described as pompous.
So while they were trying to make these decisions on the way to the cutoff, it was Reed that actually kept pushing them to take this cutoff, because he thought, wow, shortcut, this sounds great, even though everyone else was a little bit wary of doing this, because some of the women were the ones that were thinking that Hastings was not a really reputable character to begin with.
Because he was 27 years old, and he
Yeah.
had no idea what he was talking. No one had any idea what they were talking about when it came to the West.
And another interesting tidbit, this journalist by the name of Bryant, he actually got to the break between where the cutoff starts a week ahead of the Donner Party. And he went to check out the Hastings cutoff, and he realized that it's complete shit for a huge wagon party like the Donner Party.
So he got to the fork in the road,
Yeah.
and he decided that he was going to explore Hastings Cutoff because it was being published, and therefore, even though people have said he wasn't recommending it, it's still, if you're publishing it in your book, you're saying that people could try it.
Yeah.
He took the cutoff a little ways and realized
Just to check it out,
it wasn't what he said it was going to
So
be.
he went back to the fort that's at the beginning of the cutoff, and he left letters warning them not to take this cutoff, this shortcut. However, the guy who ran that fort, it would be in his best interest to have people take the cutoff, because normally people wouldn't even go in that direction. They take the Oregon Trail.
So for his business,
so
he wanted people to take this terrible cutoff.
So he concealed the letters that this journalist left warning them.
Wow.
And we all know what happens next. We'll talk about it.
Yeah. So I guess now where we're picking up is the party has taken this cutoff, and it has really led them to some desperate times. And before we even get to the cannibalism, which I'm sure you guys are aware is coming if you know anything about the Donner Party, there's unrest within the group, and indeed a murder takes place. So let's go to a clip right now describing the first murder in the Donner Party.
On October 5th, the immigrants were doubling their teams up a steep sandy hill when the Graves family wagon became entangled with the Reed wagon. Tempers flared, and the Graves driver, John Snyder, began beating the oxen with the butt of his bullwhip. James Reed hurried over to stop it, but only enraged Snyder further, who struck him savagely on the head with his whip. Reed drew his hunting knife, and as Snyder raised his arm to strike again, drove it into the teamster's chest, just below the collarbone. Snyder staggered a few yards up the hill and died.
Mr. Reed and family were taken to their tent and guarded by their friends. An assembly was convened to decide what should be done. The majority declared the deed murder and demanded retribution.
So this is really when we start seeing a change within the party, because
the disintegration.
Yeah, so he's banished, and we'll tell you a little bit about what happens to James Reed after he's banished. But when they're banishing him, it's sort of a form of sentencing him to death, because they already knew that how much they were suffering. So his chances on his own were also really bad.
Yeah, and this was how it worked back then, because west of the Continental Divide, there was no legal system. There was no American law over there, so usually these different parties would have to come down with a verdict themselves.
Yeah, it was the Wild West, and that was their justice system.
I mean, we talked about this earlier, that we felt that Reed was probably in every right to defend himself. And some people were saying not only was he being whipped, but his wife got whipped too when she came to try to defend him.
Yeah, no, it sounds like Graves had a major break from reality when he started beating the ox.
Yeah.
And just to put that into perspective, when they crossed the Great Salt Lake Desert, they lost 36 oxen.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean, that was their way of transportation, but that also would become their food source. And so to go out of his way to beat an animal was really stupid, and that's why James Reed called him out. It wasn't just like, oh my God, I love the animals. It was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is our way of survival. You can't do this.
They were already dealing with a lot of hardships that they did not expect, nor were they prepared to do.
Yeah.
Like, none of these guys, none of these people had any experience really in the wilderness, in hunting. There was very few of them that knew survival skills.
Yeah, some of them were good hunters, but what we'll see is that they weren't experienced fishermen, and their skills weren't on par with some of the mountain men that they came across, because I read a record where they came across sort of a mountain man who'd also done Hastings Pass, and he said, you guys cannot do this with this big of a group that you have. You'll never get over there with the wagons. But nevertheless, with all these delays, they start to make their way over the Sierra Nevada mountains very, very late in the season. And this is where they start to split off, because a bunch of the families want to head over to Truckee Lake, and they're trying to make their way over the mountains. And then on the day that these families, these groups were making this decision, like, okay, we're gonna really go for it, we need to get to the summit of these mountains, we need to get over these mountains, George Donner slices his hand open trying to fix his wagon, so the Donner family stay back at what is Alder Creek.
Yeah, about 6 miles further down from Truckee Lake.
Yeah, 6 miles from Truckee Lake, and Truckee Lake is about 150 miles from Sutter's Fort, which is where all the other immigrants who had gone from, wherever they were through the regular pathway were all meeting up. So they were only 150 miles away when they were at Truckee Lake, and then you have the Donner Party at Alder Creek. And this is where shit hits the fan, because October 28th, there's a very heavy snowfall that
way earlier than anticipated.
Way earlier than anticipated, and it just sort of blocks them in. They're just trapped and stuck, and they have to make winter camp. They have to set up camp. There's no way for them to move forward. That has got to be so heart-wrenching to know that you're here for the next, 3 months.
Yeah, and at this point, I mean, they'd gone through the Wasatch Mountains, which was very difficult. They'd gone through the Great Salt Lake Desert, which they lost a ton of livestock. They were almost out of water. So by the time they got there, they were already kind of fucked. And they had lost so much of their supplies. They had lost so much of their energy and their hope. And now they're stuck here for a winter.
And now they set up a camp at Truckee Lake, and they sort of go back and forth to Alder Creek. Like someone will like send messages and give way, but really what the plan is they're trying to, and they try for weeks, and they'll work up their strength and they'll save up. They try to get to Sutter, to Fort Sutter. Yeah. So that's where we're going to leave you for this part. We have the Donner Party and the other families left at Truckee Lake and Alder Creek, and when we come back, we're going to tell you about how they descended into murder and cannibalism, which made the Donner Party so infamous. We'll see you in part 2. Welcome back to Murder with Friends. Today we're talking about the Donner Party, and I am joined by my co-creator, Amir Nakui. And Amir, where we're jumping back in, we have a settlement at Truckee Lake, we have a settlement at Alder Creek, and then we have the sort of the shining city on a hill at Sutter's Fort. But this winter month, between October 28th, when the first snowfall was, until January, or throughout January, February is when they were, the first rescue party was sent, is where we see a major descent into madness. So can you sort of describe what the scenes were at the respective camps?
Yes, so they built several makeshift little cabins that were just extremely dirty because there were so many people and such limited space. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, they had limited resources because of the whole journey that preceded that.
Yeah, starting winter, they had about 80 people.
Yeah.
So there were 80 people, and I think that there were maybe 4 cabins or so.
Yeah. And it was dirty. Some of the people were already injured, like George Donner. He had cut his hand open, and it was getting colder and colder every day. Mm-hmm. And additionally, they weren't the most skilled at fishing because they were right next to a lake, mm-hmm. and the lake hadn't frozen over yet, but no one knew how to fish.
I heard that one man killed a bear.
He killed a bear, but then didn't have any.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And so they must have thought when they killed that bear, like, oh, we'll be fine. There are a number of different letters that I read and diary entries that I read where you would have these people say, well, it looks like the worst is over. Like, oh, he caught a bear, so it looks like we should be able to eat throughout winter.
Yeah.
And that is what's so particularly heart-wrenching, is because they had no idea what was to come.
Yeah, and plus they were only 150 miles away, and I think they had some correspondence with people from their party that had gone ahead mm-hmm. previously on the journey, that had reached Sutter's Fort, mm-hmm. and they had come back and they gave them provisions one time. Mm-hmm. I think that the man's name was Stanton.
Yeah, Stanton was going back and forth.
Yeah, he went back and forth. So before the winter really hit, he came back with some provisions, but they quickly went through that. Mm-hmm. And they had descended by the time it was December, they were eating the ox hide that was covering their own wagons and the roofs of their makeshift cabins.
Yeah, and they were, what I have here is, diet soon consisted of ox hide, strips of which were boiled to make a disagreeable glue-like jelly.
Imagine that, like, take your leather jacket, for instance, if you have a leather jacket, you're eating leather. Yeah. And that's the limited amount of nutrition that you can find.
Yeah, because there wasn't any grass. I heard about them reducing to eating tree bark. Yeah. But throughout this, they're getting weaker, but we have to remember that these were still westward explorers. These were people with a very resilient, with a resilient spirit mm-hmm. that they had no idea how bad it was going to get, but they knew that it was going to be rough. So they keep trying to get to Sutter's Fort. They keep trying to find Bear Valley. They go on these little expeditions, and the most notorious and famous, and the one where the Donner Party really takes its darkest turn, is with what would be known as Forlorn Hope, the Snowshoe Party. So let's talk a little bit about the Snowshoe Party. What was going on here?
So they gathered a group of 17 people, mm-hmm. both children and grown adults. I think the youngest was 10 years old.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck are you doing with a 10-year-old going on this rescue mission? But they made snowshoes because there was a ton of powdery snow that was very difficult to get through. And as they go on this expedition, after about 3 days, they're lost, confused, and snowblind.
Snowblind was something I had to look up. Can you describe what it is? It sounds like
I didn't look it up, but I have heard about it before. I think it's because snow is so reflective. It's more reflective than if there's not snow, so everything's brighter. Mm-hmm. If you're out in the snow for that long and there's sun, or even in cloudy weather, after a while you become blind.
Yeah, and then I also read that it's supposed to feel like when you get sand in your eyes. Yeah. When you're at the beach and you have all this like sand in your eyes.
So does it also have to do with the cold itself?
I think it's a little bit of a combination, but what the main thing is all the light refracting.
Yeah.
And how that is blinding.
Yeah.
So
they were lost, confused. They had been gone for 3 days already.
Totally disoriented.
They had provisions only for 6 days, I believe, and so they were quickly running out of that.
So then while they are running out of their food and they're getting increasingly more desperate, a man by the name of Patrick Dolan says that perhaps
we need to eat.
Yeah, maybe someone should die.
They even proposed that maybe 2 people have a duel, and that's how they would draw sticks.
Yeah, or that 2 people would have a duel, or if someone happened to die, because that's the point that they were looking at, where it looked very likely that someone was going to die. But ironically, as the blizzard got worse and worse, because then, by the way, in the beginning of November, it snowed, and it continued to snow for such a great length of time that they were all very delirious. It was hard to even tell. Some accounts were saying what day it was.
Yeah, and it's you should also remember that we say like they went on this expedition, and they had provisions for 6 days and whatnot, and they were only gone for 3 days before they started even considering cannibalism. They were already starving up till that point.
Yeah, it wasn't like they left feeling well rested
with a full
and
belly
full.
or anything. They were starving to begin with, and then they went on this further expedition.
Yeah, they were going on this expedition out of desperation because camp was that bleak.
Yeah.
And they knew that if they didn't make a change, that their chances were terrible of surviving.
At least at camp they had boiled leather to eat. They didn't have that here, so.
Yeah, delicious.
Yeah.
Well, as the blizzard gets worse and worse, as the snow gets worse and worse, it's actually Patrick Dolan himself who begins to start losing his mind.
Yeah, this was kind of funny when I read it.
What? What do you?
Though he was when it's extremely cold and you become hypothermic, a lot of times you just lose your mind and you feel like you're burning up. Paradoxically.
Really?
Yeah.
I had never heard
when
that before.
You're severe hypothermia. So at one point, I read that he ripped off all of his clothes and ran out into the blizzard, yelling and ranting and raving.
Oh, because he was just delirious.
He was delirious,
Whoa.
and that's kind of what happens. You feel like you're on fire.
So he ended up dying.
Yeah, but then he came back and he died a few days later.
So he had a major breakdown.
Yeah.
Took off his clothing, probably gave himself even worse hypothermia than what we can assume he was already sort of dealing with. And then the guy who proposed that maybe they would need to kill someone and eat that person is the first one to die.
Yeah.
So.
And then after him, a few other people started dropping dead, and they started
12-year-old.
eating them.
The next one to die was, I believe, it was a 12-year-old. And after this, again, this is the snowshoe party, so we're not at any of the base camps right now. After they decide that they will eat the remains of Dolan, not all of them, but many of them.
Yeah, there was 2 Native American guides as part of them, and they refused to eat anything.
Yeah. So then the 12-year-old boy who was also near death, even though he is feeding from the human remains of Patrick Dolan, he also dies. And
they start talking about killing the 2 Native American guides that they had and eating them.
Yeah, the thing with the snowshoe party, the forlorn hope, is it seems like, I don't think this is the right expression to use for it, but when it rains, it pours.
Yeah.
Like one guy died, and then another kid died, and then 2 more. It was Antonio and Graves. 2 other people died on this trip. And then once they sort of ripped the Band-Aid off where they were able to eat Patrick Dolan and live with themselves and also survive, it's like they crossed a line in the sand, and then they were totally fine with eating whoever died. Like once you start with the first body, it's not that big of a deal, except for the 2 Native Americans who said that they wouldn't eat. And then
they started conspiring to eat them.
Yes.
And one of the other party members went and warned the 2 guides, and this is where we come to our next murder. So they were warned that there was plans that they wanted to kill them and eat them. So they both ran away in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
to
they
try
took
to get
off.
away.
By the way, these are their Native American guides that are helping them with this terrain and this landscape that they are unfamiliar with. And their thanks by this party, which again, they're not in their right mind, but it just, to me, showed that, we are still living in pre-civil rights America at this point in time, where they're like, oh, we should just, the next ones to go, now that we're all cool with eating human remains, should obviously be the Native Americans because they are not the same as us.
Right. So the two of them, they ran away in the middle of the night. However, the rest of the party caught up with them a few days later, and when they did catch up with them,
I have a quote, actually. So this is according to Snowshoe Party member Jesse Quinn Thornton, with regards to the killing of the 2 Native Americans. He says, quote, "The morning of January 8th, they came upon the Indians lying upon the ground in a totally helpless condition. They had been without food for 8 or 9 days and had been 4 days without fire. They could not probably have lived for more than 2 or 3 hours. Nevertheless, Eddie demonstrated against their being killed. Foster affirmed that he was compelled to do it. Eddie refused to see the dead consummated and went on about 200 yards and halted. Lewis was told that he must die, and he was shot through the head. Salvador was dispatched in the same manner immediately after. Mr. Eddie did not see who fired the gun. The flesh was then cut from their bones and dried." Whew.
yeah, it's rough.
Yeah, so something that I think surprised me about learning more of the Donner Party for today's episode was how much murder did exist. Because I think that when you hear about the Donner Party, a lot of times we hear about these people in desperate times that were forced to feed off of the dead, and that is true, but there was so much anger. People became animals because of how desperate
When you're
they
stripped
were.
down to just the basics,
People killed.
You're gonna act like an animal
People
just
killed,
to survive.
no problem. I mean, that's what I was trying to get at. Once the first person died, and that sort of stripped them of their humanity when they realized that they were eating their friend, their fellow explorer. It sort of took away any moral compass that they were feeling about whether or not they should be eating human remains. And then it's still a very sad and sorry scene at Truckee Lake and Alder Creek. But by February 18th, the first relief party arrives. And what they find at the Donner encampment is truly horrifying. So let's take a look at a clip that outlines that.
Even the wind held its breath as the suggestion was made that were one to die, the rest might live.
Cannibalism. Christmas Day, 1846. They eat their first human. Bodies are cut up, flesh labeled, so people don't eat their own kin. Four rescue parties bring out some survivors. George Donner's body is found, skull split open, his brain removed.
So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what was found at the sites of these camps, because it was really,
Hey, they had a
truly
system
horrid.
though, so people didn't have to eat their own relatives.
That's true. And that's
a basic level of decency.
Sure. I can only imagine what these rescue parties had to make sense of, because it was so difficult to get word and find out exactly what was happening and who was left. And mothers were having to send their kids away, and mothers were having to leave their kids. And so a lot of families got broken up and separated. James Reed, who we talked about in the first segment, who was cast away by the party early on, did eventually survive. He made it to Sutter's Fort, and he was very instrumental in getting these rescue parties back to Truckee Lake and Alder Creek, which is remarkable. The Reed family was the only family that made it out completely intact, which is amazing. But the Donner Party was the one that
shambles.
Yeah, the Donner Party was in
Party
shambles.
was further away in Alders Creek.
Just 6 miles, though.
Yeah.
We've been
Which is
talking
a
about
lot
a lot. 6
back-
miles back then is a lot.
Yeah.
But you can camp today at Alder Creek.
Yeah.
I could go there and, let's hope, be fine and not have to boil my dog to survive. Because, they also ate their dogs.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure that
Way,
if they're
way
eating
before.
people, well, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
I've seen, there's this, what is it, the Far Side clip? There's a Far Side cartoon where it's like, we drew straws, and it's 3 guys and a dog, and we drew straws, and like, we're sorry, Doug, but you have to die, and it's like the dog just being like, sorry, man. Can you imagine?
I missed the Far Side. That was good.
Yeah. So between February 18th And April 10th is when the final sort of salvage party from Sutter's Fort are sent to recover any sort of remains, any possessions that were left, because there are Donner orphans, but the family members have all died, they've all perished. And they wanted to sell the possessions that were left, or whatever was left, so that the orphans could have some sort of a life. Another thing that I read is that one of the members of the rescue party proposed to a 12-year-old girl when he was rescuing her.
Yeah, and she said no.
She said no, but was very flattered in her letter to a cousin, which I was like, wow.
She was so emaciated, and she thought she was gross, but this guy still wanted to
Or
marry
maybe
her.
she thought she was 12.
Yeah, or maybe
she was like, why are you asking me
I
this?
don't know, it was a ripe old age back then.
Well, what was weird to read about is how they all sort of, it was terrible, and it was such a dark time in history, but because of the spirit of those who were willing to make that trek out west, they all moved on with their lives. A lot of them remarried if their wives died. A lot of the kids went on and ended up being fine. There was one, I think a teenager who was with a rescue party. They stopped at a general store somewhere and he ate himself to death because he broke into a store.
I'm glad you brought that up. So during these relief parties, a lot of the people that were coming down were very careful not to give too much food to these starving people, because if you're starving and you just gorge yourself with food, you die.
They had to ration it out.
Yeah.
But when you're starving, you don't understand that.
Yeah.
And they would just get really angry. And these were people who had been living in squalor for so long that manners and that sort of thing, they were literally willing to cut a bitch for some bread.
Yeah, there was an interesting quote when the first relief party came. One of the women, she got out of her tent and she said, "Are you real men or are you angels from heaven?"
Yeah. The way that I heard the quote was, "Are you from California or are you from heaven?"
Yeah.
Which is either way. That's just how delirious they were.
Yeah.
A final story that I want to talk about, because there's no way that we can break down everything about the Donner Party.
I know, we've already had to skip over a lot.
I know.
But
hopefully by talking about it on the show, it sort of gives our viewers a little bit of a tease so they can look up these stories on their own, because there's a lot to read about. There's so many stories that would be their own amazing version of The Revenant if they were isolated on their own. I think James Reed is very fascinating.
Plus, we're just so disconnected from it. I feel like even thinking about being out in the wilderness, like we deal with winters and seasons every year, and we live in every part of this country. But like to imagine that trying to survive an entire winter in a mountain.
Or just knowing that a snowfall is
life or death.
Life or death. That's a different mentality.
We have fucking roads now. We don't even think about that. These people, there were no roads back then. They were the ones trailing the roads. And they had wagons and they had to move it over a goddamn mountain. And if they couldn't do it in time, they were fucked.
Yeah, then that was it.
Anyway, tell this last story. Really paint that picture for us.
Let's go for it. Yeah. So, Louis Keseberg, we're deciding we're going to go with his last name being Keseberg. Could be Kesberg. If you know the pronunciation, please let us know in the comment section below. So he was one of the families that we mentioned that did make it to Truckee Lake. Well, not one of the families, but he was a part of the families, and he was also his own person that made it to Truckee Lake. And as the rescue parties were coming back and forth, beginning in February, they would take whoever was ready to go. And some people weren't ready. They didn't have their families back together yet, or some of them didn't have like the strength yet, so they would leave them with some rations, and then the next rescue party would come, and then they'd be ready to go. And Louis Keseberg was not one of these people. So when they went back April 10th, one of the final salvage parties, they came across this guy, Louis, and he was just living his life still around the area of Truckee Lake. And they'd asked him about some people who were also around Truckee Lake that never made it back with the rescue party. And he sort of had these weird stories saying, very vague, amorphous stories like, I saw her and she actually said she was going back with this person, and that's why maybe you haven't seen her yet, or maybe she's going off to Sacramento, or she took off with a guy in the Mexican-American War. Like, he had these vague stories about how he was surviving out here. And then they looked in his living structure and they found a whole bunch of body parts. Yeah. So that's what I think drives me crazy about this story, is that some people ate people out of desperation, and it's something that they would hope to never speak of again. And then I think you hear about this guy, Lewis, who began to thrive off of it, or at least it became normal to him, that it was a normal way of life, that it was for him literally a dog-eat-dog world, and he was fine living that way. He never was trying to cross over to Sutter's Fort. He was just living his life, and then the Salvage Party came across him. And that is what is so unsettling about the Donner Party, because you have to wonder, what would you do in these times of desperation? Would you just do what you need to do to survive, or would you find that in that darkness, actually a different side of you would awaken, and you would perhaps thrive in killing and eating people?
Yeah.
Like, he was a straight up cannibal.
He was. And that just goes back to our roots as like ancient prehistoric humans. And I think one of the other anecdotes that stuck out to me was when they came to get Keseberg, they found him and he was holding a severed arm. And as he realized that this was a relief party, he threw the severed arm back into his tent. And like you said, when they opened his tent, they found a pot full of body parts. And they did investigations afterwards to see if there was any murder involved in any of this. And it all came back inconclusive.
Well, I also read that they figured out whose arm he was eating when they found him, and that the husband of the dead woman swore that if they ever met in California that he would kill him. But they never were able to come across each other again. But that's another crazy thing, is because it was so lawless and there weren't any laws out west and everything had not been established yet, that the best that this guy could do, whose wife had just been eaten, was,
look,
I'm going to kill you if I ever see you.
And also part of it was the government didn't want these stories to come out and be like so bad. They wanted the West and the people traveling west to seem like a good thing, because it was in the best interest of the American government to have as many people emigrate to the West so they could claim it as their own when that time comes.
Yeah, because that's what they were trying to do, and that's what was going on with the Mexican-American War.
So when the news finally came of the tragic situation of the Donner Party, they kind of painted it as like this heroic thing of like, look at these hardy individuals who fell into these tough times. Yeah, they ate each other, but like they made it to California and they're all better for it.
Well, and
I think that's part of the reason why these investigations into the murder and everything, they didn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I also think that the letters from the people of the Donner Party, or the people from Truckee Lake, reflected exactly what you were saying. There's one letter from, I think it's the same 12-year-old girl that was proposed to, and she writes to her cousin saying, "Oh, please come out west. You know, I'm telling you this story not to scare you, but just to let you know that you don't know what trouble is. Like, we went through major trouble. You know, cannibalism, boy, is that real trouble. But you should still come out here, because there's still so much opportunity out here, because you could sort of, you know, take a plot of land and be like, this is ours now." So yeah, the story of the Donner Party and these people, and just how resilient they were, but the darkness that they had to brave to get to that point, because of the 90 immigrants, 45 survived.
Yeah, and I think in any similar situation, people will resort to cannibalism to survive like this. If given the right context, like you're in the wilderness, you have no other means of finding food, and there's enough other humans around you, I think every time it'll turn into cannibalism. You have the whole Andes mountain crash that happened where those athletes, they crashed into the Andes and they ended up having to eat each other. And then I was reading somewhere else that way back when we were living side by side with Neanderthals, and we were Homo sapiens were trying to move into Western Europe where the Neanderthals were. We ended up killing and eating them to survive, because back then we were just hunter-gatherers.
So you think the Donner Party is just a more recent example of what is in human nature?
I think throughout history and prehistory, if you would look back before we were able to sustain ourselves with crops and agriculture, when we were more nomadic, this happened a lot. I don't think about, but
when I was reading through everything, I was telling myself, "You'd never do that, Grace. You'd totally never do that."
That's what you say, but you're not going to be Grace when you haven't eaten like a nourishing meal in months. When you've had to eat boiled leather, when you're not going to be the same person. You're going to be just this organism that needs to eat to survive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're like a single-celled organism at that point.
To that point, you know what I'm surprised we didn't hear about more? Suicide.
That's really interesting, yeah.
We heard a lot about them banishing people and killing each other and eating each other, but that sort of misery and despair, living in that, I'm surprised that there weren't more people driven to suicide. And maybe there are that we just didn't hear about, or because the bodies were just really they were racking up the bodies, so they were just sort of eating them. Maybe they just didn't detail the cause of death for all of them. But that's what I would jump to, I think, sooner than
eating someone else.
Yeah, you know what's going to be really funny is if we're ever like trapped on a desert island, this episode would definitely come out to haunt us. Be like, she said she'd never do it, and there she was. She ate a mirror.
This is some weird thing that I've always thought about. Could you survive off eating yourself, like just bits by bits?
No, you'd bleed. You'd bleed out.
Yeah, but like, what if you cut like just little chunks of your butt?
First of all,
and like you
I only have big chunks of my butt.
That's true. You have a huge ass.
Yeah. So,
but does that work, or does the damage that you're inflicting to your body kind of counteract the calories that you're gaining from eating yourself?
Yeah,
and like, so it's never, you can never survive.
It's an interesting discussion, Amir. Hope you guys weren't eating.
Yeah, go eat your ass tonight and tell me how it works out.
Look, but I also think that you would pass out from the pain. You wouldn't be able to do it.
Okay, I'm not talking about like cutting off an entire butt cheek. I'm just like,
you would still pass out.
Why would you pass out from just like you're slicing?
I can't wait to hear this debate in the comment section. I want to know from you guys in the comment section below, what do you think about Amir's theory? If you were trapped on a desert island and you had to start eating bits and pieces of yourself, would you do it? What do you think about the Donner Party? Had you heard about this before? Are you totally grossed out? On that note, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and we'll see you next time on Murder with Friends.
Drop it. Well, it's an old school power panel. Ben Mankiewicz, Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian.
Hi.
Hey, almost the oldest host we have. That's not an insult. That's just to mean the ones that have been here the longest.
You started young. How old were you when you started?
20.
She was 13 when she started, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Man.
All right, look, let's put it a nicer way. It's the A team.
Okay, yeah, I like that. Let's do that.
Okay,
that's
it's
fun.
the A team. All right.
Okay.
And we're on for the whole 2 hours together, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
look at that. All right. And also on Sirius Satellite
I'm not
Radio.
sending a text. I'm looking up something for our first story.
Yeah, so when I was in New York, I was on a couple of other Sirius Satellite Radio shows on the same channel, and Dino Badala's show and Mark Thompson's show. So everybody check those out too. Those are fun.
Number of people in radio named Mark Thompson.
Higher.
Yeah.
Yes, 17.
Yeah.
Higher or lower? Higher.
There are many.
So it's not our Mark Thompson.
It's not our Mark
It's
Thompson.
never our Mark Thompson. That's
Yeah. There are many, many Mark Thompsons. Anyway, although Mark's a lovely guy, and I've known him a long time, could be our Mark Thompson.
Yeah, sure.
Just doesn't have to be.
No, I'm not knocking
doesn't
Mark Thompson.
happen to be here. Okay. Anyways, I just want to quickly note for the record the Bernie shirt I'm wearing, which is kind of awesome. Bernie So Punk. Is it going to be relevant in 2020? I don't know. Are you going to be one of the first people to have it? No, because a lot of people have it from 2016, but you would be among those folks.
When is he going to start doing something to get involved. I mean, stop just talking and start doing something. That's what I want.
Yeah, that's a good point. This used to be for the presidential race. This now could be for Medicare for all. I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying. By the way, my new favorite shirt, I just didn't want to overwear it on air, is Rosa Parks Resist. Okay, the original resistor. Okay. I don't know, I just love this.
She was the original resistor, you think?
Well, I don't know about original. We might do a Thomas Jefferson one, but anyway, she didn't. It certainly did resist. ShopTYT.com to get all that fun stuff. Okay, we got a crazy show ahead for you guys. We got the healthcare stuff. We got the Russians on Facebook. We've got free speech. Is it yes? Is it no? And one of my favorite stories is GOP donors and how they are leading the proceedings behind the scenes on the GOP healthcare proposal. Casper, go.
All right. Will Mitch McConnell bring the Graham-Cassidy healthcare replacement bill to a vote? That is the question people are asking today after it turns out that John McCain made a very transparent, very overt statement regarding what he plans on doing with his vote. He will not vote in favor of the Graham-Cassidy replacement plan. Let me give you some more details on that. He said, and this is a statement by John McCain, I cannot in good conscience vote for the Graham-Cassidy proposal. I believe we could do better working together, Republicans and Democrats, and have not yet really tried. Nor could I support it without knowing how much it will cost, how it will affect insurance premiums, and how many people will be helped or hurt by it without a full Congressional Budget Office score, which won't be available by the end of the month. We won't have reliable answers to any of those questions. So, John McCain is firm in his decision, and keep in mind that the reason why Senate Republicans are rushing to vote on this legislation is because after September 30th, they will need more than a simple majority in order to pass. And so, McCain's decision means the bill doesn't appear to have the votes to pass because Senator Rand Paul has said that he's opposed to it, and also Senator Susan Collins from Maine has said she's leaning against it as well. So it doesn't look like they're gonna have the votes necessary.
Okay, so first of all, Rand Paul is against the bill because it's not conservative enough. He'd like to kick more people off of healthcare, just to be absolutely clear. And McCain couldn't be clearer that he's not going to vote for it. So if you knock out 3 Republicans, they definitely don't have the votes. So it looks like it's over, but Ben, is it really over?
Yeah, so it's funny because you have, Rand Paul has been a solid no throughout because he thinks it retains too much of Obamacare, essentially what you said, Jake. And Susan Collins is leaning against it. That's our best bet. The only person who I'm positive will vote no is Susan Collins. Rand Paul is they'll tweak it, or something. There's something that he voted for the other one, right? Now they aren't the same. I got it. This is a different way of doing it, and Rand Paul particularly objects to this way of doing it. And John McCain, I sent a text around to Cenk and a couple other guys that I wanted action. I wanted $10. That I'm not saying that he'll vote for it, but that now that he's said this no, which as you said is really. There's no ambiguity in the statement, but he'll equivocate because at some point in the next week, he'll say, well, if we could get a rush score, I want to see it. I understand, it turns out we did reach out to Joe Manchin and that's encouraging, it shows some bipartisan. Like he'll say something that puts him maybe back in play. He still might vote no at the end, but my hunch is he'll equivocate.
I think that there's one thing or one person that John McCain hates more than the Affordable Care Act, and that's Donald Trump. Yeah. He hates Donald Trump.
Look, well, he could have taken it down to the wire again, but I guess he wouldn't do that to his, he might vote against his friends, but he wouldn't vote Lindsey Graham as his close friends.
I forget that they're buddies.
So he was saying to Lindsey Graham, like, okay, I would like to do this at the last second again, but you're my friend, so I'm just telling you now, I'm not there.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it, maybe that's it.
So the reason that Lindsey Graham is one of the sponsors is to get John McCain's vote. They're the best friends in the Senate.
And Lindsey Graham's lifelong commitment to healthcare policy, don't forget that.
That's a good one. Yeah. So, and the donors really, really want this, that's a different story, but and part of the reason is that people just never talk about the other part of the bill where it gives hundreds of billions of dollars in tax cuts to the rich.
Our network voraciously opposed Medicaid expansion in state after state. Tim Phillips, head of the Koch-founded nonprofit Americans for Austerity, told GOP donors last June these Republicans who expanded Medicaid were flatly wrong, so we're going to continue holding these Republicans accountable.
So, in other words, give me the tax cuts, God damn it. What did I pay all you guys to be my representatives, if you will? Yeah. And so, but that leads to, the reason I'm bringing that up is it leads to my part of my theory about John McCain, which is connected to my overall theory about US politics, which is that he's definitely not going to run again.
Yeah.
And now he's untethered from the donors.
I love it.
And the minute you're untethered from the donors, all of a sudden, you could vote your conviction. You could vote the right way. And I think that's partly what's happening here.
What I don't understand, and this gets to what would ultimately be our long theoretical conversation about the influence of money in politics, not the insidious role, we 100% agree there, but the direct influence of doing the donors bidding. You know, didn't Bernie Sanders' campaign, Barack Obama's campaign teach these guys, like, you don't need money from everybody. You can raise money elsewhere, right? Like
no,
that's
it definitely did not.
It didn't teach them, but I mean, I'm not. Yeah. I don't think I'm wrong. And maybe Bill Cassidy can't raise money that way because he looks like a clown who just has yet to put the makeup on.
Well, so that's that's an excellent description of Bill Cassidy, and I'm sure Jimmy Kimmel would agree. Well, look, there's two different dynamics at play here. One is Bernie Sanders ran for president, and so that you get a ton of free media. Bill Cassidy and others that are running in race in Louisiana are not going to get free media, so they need the donor money. They think they need the donor money to win. The second part, and that's somewhat true. The second part of that is that they can't go get small donors because they don't do anything for small donors. So Bernie Sanders could replace large donors with small donors because he was actually serving the voters. Cassidy has never done that in his career. None of these Republicans have ever done that in their career. So they couldn't possibly raise the kind of small donor money they need. Now, did anyone learn a lesson from Bernie Sanders' campaign? Yeah, I did. So that's why we started Justice Democrats, who is relying only on small donors.
I hear you, and there's great truth to what you said, and yes, it's certainly true that. But the fact of the matter is that whoever Bill Cassidy runs against, whatever Democrat he ends up running against, although in Louisiana he's likely to run against a Republican, these guys, all of these guys, Lindsey Graham, many of these voters will vote because they'll be afraid of the communist who he's running against, whether it's a Hillary Clinton disciple or whether it's a Bernie Sanders disciple. The messaging will be the same, right? That they're dangerous and they're red and they're out of step and they're going to socialize your world. So you can raise money off that, you know, even if the fact of the matter is, yeah, you're not actually delivering policy that will end up helping those people, but you could still do it. I'm struck by, you see the untethered feel of a politician who isn't bound to anybody is got to be freeing. And I'm surprised there are still so few.
Yeah.
And I'm curious whether this ability to raise money quickly in small numbers will have an impact of greater freedom in the years ahead.
Well, look,
assuming that there's no massive change in campaign finance.
I think it's happening right now. It's just happening on the Democratic side. I don't. Republicans are going to be a lot more reluctant to do it because their whole party is based on donors and serving them. But I talked to a candidate earlier today, which obviously I can't disclose, thinking about doing the same thing. Ro Khanna, obviously, no corporate PAC money anymore. He's a Just Democrat. Beto O'Rourke is not, but he doesn't take corporate PAC money either. I think there's now 6 people in Congress who said, no, I'm not taking corporate PAC money. I'm done with it. It's a small trend, but it's a trend and it has begun. It's so far only Democrats.
So let's talk a little bit about public opinion in regard to the latest attempt to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. Public policy polling spoke to a representative sample of Americans, and it turns out that it is not a popular piece of legislation. Let's go to graphic 4. Only 24% of Americans support the Graham-Cassidy legislation. The healthcare bill Republicans are furiously whipping to pass ahead of September 30th. Only 20% of those polled said that they thought the bill would cover more Americans. So it's just as unpopular as the past proposals, and it's interesting because right now the Senate GOP is catching heat from all sides, right? So they're catching heat from the donors who want their tax cuts. They're catching heat from their constituents who do not like this legislation. They do like the Medicaid expansion. They do like some of the protections, like the protection regarding pre-existing conditions that the Affordable Care Act provided for them. Now, sure, during the Obama administration, everyone wants to go ahead and hate Obama and talk about how much they hate Obamacare, but when push comes to shove, the majority of Americans actually do like and appreciate the protections that it offers.
Yeah, so to be fair, they did at one point bottom out at 17%. So one of their healthcare proposals was slightly more unpopular than this.
And the reason why this one is higher is because it hasn't been scored.
Yeah.
Right. When the score comes in and it says 28 to 32 million, probably 32 million Americans will lose their health coverage, by 2026. Well, then it'll have the same atrocious score that every other bill, except of course in Alaska, where everybody will keep the Affordable Care Act coverage because this bill would allow Alaska the way to get them to defeat Obamacare is by tantalizing them by allowing a state to entirely keep Obamacare.
To get Lisa Murkowski's vote, which they need. So let's talk about the vector that we use to figure out if something's going to be popular or unpopular, okay? So there's the vector. So there's a couple of factors here to consider. One is propaganda, the other is reality. Now, in an issue where there is almost no reality, propaganda can overwhelm. So for example, when Republicans scare their voters about Sharia law, well, there's no reality to that, so the propaganda can work completely. So that's never gonna touch their personal lives. So they can be like, oh my God, the Sharia law is coming and I'm in a panic and we gotta make sure we defeat it and I hate those guys, and it becomes an issue of identity, etc. But when you have an issue like healthcare, which is very real, your family's either going to have healthcare or it's not gonna have healthcare. It's either gonna cover certain things or it's not. You're either gonna pay a certain number or you're not. And depending on those numbers, someone in your family might die. It's the only thing in play is not just reality. There's also still overwhelming propaganda, but that propaganda is at least met by reality in a clash. And so in this case, no matter how much propaganda they did, oh, Obamacare, oh, God, that's connected to a black guy. Did you know that? Okay, and etc. And look, it's not, even if it's not racial, just the demagoguing about death panels and all the things that they did. Okay, but so that worked. That worked to make Obamacare underwater, less than 50% popularity for a long, long time.
Throughout the Obama administration.
Yeah. Now though, it has hit a wall of reality where people are saying, wait, okay, you got me to hate Obamacare because I didn't really quite understand it. Like the version in Kentucky, by the way, they actually love. And Mitch McConnell campaigned pretending to be in favor of it. But they just called it something else for propaganda purposes, right? But now when they see the alternative, and the alternative is, no, you're not gonna get health care. And if you're a senior citizen, we're gonna charge you like 4 or 5 times more. What? Okay, and it's gonna cover less stuff, and then 20, 30 million people are not gonna have health care anymore. They're like, I mean, yeah, the other guy was black, but I really want my health care.
Yeah.
And I know you said the other guy had death panels, but without the health care, I'm gonna die. So that kind of sounds like a death panel to me. So it's just too much reality in this case for the propaganda to overwhelm it. Hence, 20% is miserable.
Yeah, and you have, and they're attempting to, they're going on television and they're talking it up and they're arguing with Jimmy Kimmel. We've reached a very strange point. I was talking to Michael Schur today, my brother actually, today, and in 1977, if Johnny Carson had argued with a Republican senator with Alan Simpson, right, in 1977, or Howard Baker in 1977 about health care, and one guy going on Meet the Press and then Carson going on his show and arguing, we would have thought, that's ridiculous. Johnny, you're a comedian on late night television. Do your interviews with Burt Reynolds and move along. Burt Reynolds was a movie star.
He's a Jew with a mustache, right?
That's right. And stay out of this lane, which is the line they're using now all the time. Jimmy Kimmel's wife, who's the head writer on the show, had a great tweet. She said, no, after what we've been through, it's our lane. Look out, we're merging.
Oh, that's a great line.
Get it.
She's the head writer on Kimmel's show. They've been married for a while.
No wonder.
But it would have been absurd. Whereas now we've entered into a place where when I saw the headline from many on the right and the tweets from many on the right, how ridiculous is it that Jimmy Kimmel was arguing with Bill Cassidy? And I thought, I'm sure Jimmy Kimmel knows far more about healthcare than Bill Cassidy.
Why would
I'm
it be
positive.
Why would it be ridiculous?
Because he went through it, so he had a crisis with his child. He is an empathetic human being, and he talked to other parents, and he talked to doctors and nurses. And at some point, they asked, "Hey, what if we didn't have this great insurance from Disney?" And they went, "Well, then," and he was like, "Oh my God, that's horrible." And they're like, "But you can people get covered now." And so he's like, "Oh, that's great," right? Because he's a normal, and he has some. And he read in, and he cared about it. And I'm certain he cares more about it because Bill Cassidy, in every appearance he has, indicates he didn't even know what's in the bill that has his name on it.
That's right, yeah.
So it's going along with that. The other part is that's different from 1977 is that, it was far from perfect. I'm not idealizing the good old days, but there was an actual intellectual debate and principle debate from time to time about some issues. Now it's all the debates are littered with lies.
That's right.
And so when Cassidy and Lindsey Graham talk about, oh my God, we're going to help the red states here, and the blue states have been ripping you off. People then go, wait a minute though. It's the only reason the blue states are getting more money now is because they signed up for what was available. And some of the people who debunk that Republican line is other Republicans who are governors of states like Ohio and Michigan and go, no, we signed up for it because the government is the federal government is helping to take care of our citizens, which we thought was a huge win. So when you say that we're unduly getting money in Ohio and Michigan led by Republican governors, that's not true. That's just a lie. And so when you go around pretending that, hey, you know what, these red states are going to be way better off because the blue states were ripping out, the second part of that equation is also not true. The red states are not going to be better off. They're eventually going to have their Medicaid cut. That's a fact.
And the Republican governors, like in my home state of Maryland, Larry Hogan, the governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan took the money, right? And they took the money in Ohio, right? Because it was the only logic. Because turning down the money was just spiteful. It was just an attempt to say Obamacare is not coming here,
right.
And the people who suffer for it were the poorest people and the neediest people in your state. That's all it was. And so there are, and many of these Republican governors, as Cenk said, have come out now. And so whether it's a traditionally blue state like Maryland or an actual red state like Alaska, and they're like, well, actually, no.
Yeah, and even some of
I'm right about Alaska. Didn't the governor of Alaska say?
Yep. They were trying to woo him, but at the end he was like, no, I know you're trying to entice me with more money, but what you're saying is just not true. Right. And by the way, administrators in even the deepest red states say, no, they are going to cut Medicaid. I mean, look, maybe we're in favor of it because we're Republicans and we're awesome, but and it's awesome to cut Medicaid, but they are in fact going to cut Medicaid. So they're lying. So it's a different dynamic. That's what leads to the frustration of someone like Jimmy Kimmel going, wait a minute, that's just not remotely true. And Johnny Carson, I don't think would have been in a situation to burst out like that because it was just a different dynamic. And finally, speaking of different dynamics, now that they've seen the alternative, Obamacare polling at 54%, above water, more than 50% popular, is gaining in popularity every single day. They're like, well, I mean, they told me Obamacare was bad. They didn't tell me that their proposal was way, way worse. Given that, I want pre-existing conditions covered. Obamacare not so bad.
And look, man, if we lived in any way a civilized political environment, Obamacare has problems, right? Many of those problems brought on by the states that wouldn't take the Medicaid money, but also in areas where there isn't any competition, right? So then there'd be a civilized, normal debate, the kind that we had at times in 1977. About buttressing it, about making it better and fixing those problems. Which, by the way, everyone involved with Obamacare, everyone who launched it, everyone who planned, thought would happen, right? I mean, it would have been, if Obama was president, he'd be like, great, yes, fix those problems.
All right, I lied. I'm going to say one super last thing. Okay, you know what's polling at 3 times the rate of the Republican proposal? Medicare for all at 60%, more popular than Obamacare. and 3 times as popular as the Republican proposals.
Can I say one thing? Because I think I had a good idea, and I don't have a lot of them. And it involves reading my last tweet, but it's significant because my thought was this, is that Donald Trump, anytime he tweets about anything having to do with the ACA, right, and repealing it, and his last one was Rand Paul, or whoever votes against the health care bill will forever be known as the Republican who saved Obamacare, right? So then you subtweet that and you write essentially what I wrote here, which is the open enrollment period to sign up for the ACA health insurance for 2018 starts November 1st, 2017 and runs through 12/15, and then link to the open enrollment, which I actually didn't do, but I will when I do it again. Like, because Trump cut by 90% advertising for that very fact. Part of that is getting people, because literally doesn't want people to sign up to get health care. So they cut that for 90%. So if we could take any time Donald Trump mentions it and then use that to just remind people, hey, you want to sign up for 2018? And it's probably still going to be there because Graham Cassidy may be dead now. Here's how to do it. Here's the link to do it. I think it'd be a really effective way to combat Donald Trump if thousands and thousands of people did it.
All right, sounds good.
All right, let's talk about the donors a little more because I have some details that the audience should know about. The New York Times has uncovered a story involving GOP donors and how furious they are with the GOP for failing at passing anything legislatively that would, of course, benefit these very donors. Now, the Graham Cassidy healthcare bill is the latest example, but these donors are trying to make sure that they do get their tax cuts in upcoming debates that are likely to happen. Now, Senator Cory Gardner, during a recent meeting with GOP senators, mentioned something about these donors, and I want to share it with you. Campaign fundraising was drying up, he said, because of the widespread disappointment among donors over the inability of the Republican Senate to repeal the Affordable Care Act or do much of anything else. He was quoted as saying, "Donors are furious. We haven't kept our promise."
That is the most telling quote in all of politics, because the Republicans keep saying, well, you know, we made a promise to our voters and that we would repeal Obamacare, and so we're gonna have to deliver on that promise. Chuck Grassley's talking about that, et cetera. And you're like, wait a minute, though, your proposal is polling at 20%. So it doesn't seem like a lot of Americans are on your side, including Republicans, including your voters. So wait, who did you make that promise to? And here is the Republican senators clarifying, no, we didn't mean voters. We made a promise to our donors.
Right, and there's an interesting thing happening right now because everyone's angry with the GOP, with these particular senators, because on one hand you have the constituents who, you know, even if they lean to the right, they're aware of what's going on, which is why the Graham Cassidy legislation is polling at about 24% approval, right? And so constituents don't want it, but then donors want their tax cuts. And so, you know, they're obviously conflicting here, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like constituents are politically aware, and there will be consequences for those who vote in favor of this legislation. I want to skip ahead to something else Gardner said that I thought was super interesting. Mr. Gardner did not specifically urge approval for the so-called Graham Cassidy health proposal that the Senate may vote on next week. At the time of this meeting, that plan seemed essentially dead. So it seems like the Senate GOP has already decided, like, yeah, this doesn't look good, right? Let's continue with that. He was seen as speaking more generally and mainly looking forward to the coming debate over tax cuts.
Yeah,
of course.
I saw a tweet from somebody that in the GOP caucus, Trump's tax cut plan was gaining steam. I was like, hey man, yeah, I think it's got it. I don't think we needed to gain steam. I don't know why this feels bungled to me. Obviously, it's bungled because they didn't repeal the Affordable Care Act, and obviously at one point or many points, McConnell thought he could in some variation. But they probably should have started with the tax cuts.
Yeah, I guess.
And maybe there's some reason why.
I'll tell you why they didn't. I
just thought of why they didn't.
Okay, so what is not talked about enough and is very relevant to this story about the donors is that $600 to $700 billion in tax cuts are put in to repealing Obamacare.
That's right.
So it's like our Republican donors like the Koch brothers or Cory Gardner talks about how he's got a big donor in Colorado who's mad at him. Oh my, it's so obvious they just work for them. They're just their servants. It's so pathetic. Anyway, so those guys wanted, that was like an appetizer. They wanted it's not like those Republican donors as vicious as you might think they are, like, I want to make sure you don't have insurance. They just don't give a damn whether you have insurance or not. They just want their damn tax cuts. So the Trump tax cuts that come afterwards are about $7 trillion. So they're 10 times as much. So what the donors want was, give me a nice little appetizer, let me warm up on a $700 billion tax cut, then let's move on to the $7 trillion tax cut, because if you do the $7 trillion tax cut first, when you ask for another $700 billion, people might go, oh, come on, right? But that's why they went in the order that they did, but they bungled this one because it affects people's health care.
Right.
And so, but now when they move on to the tax cuts, every Republican will hold because they all work for their donors. The only one now, with my new theory, the only one who could possibly break ranks, not the moderates, not even Collins, Murkowski, not any of those guys. The only one who could possibly break ranks is McCain, because he's definitely not going to run again. So God knows what McCain will do.
Right. Well, also just keep in mind that, they're not looking out for, the middle class or working class Americans they claim they're looking out for, right? So anytime you hear a Republican, in some cases even, so-called blue dog Democrats talk about these tax cuts, first of all, they refer to it as tax reform. It's not tax reform. The only thing they're focusing on is cutting taxes, period. But they say that, the emphasis is gonna be on the middle class. They wanna provide more money for you so you can go off and do what you want with your own money and not have so much government involved in your choices. But who are their donors? Their donors aren't, mostly represented by middle class individuals. They're corporations, they're the wealthiest people. They want to give these tax cuts to the wealthy. So every time you hear someone from the GOP go on CNN and talk about how they're just looking out for the middle class, they want to provide more money for you, that is not the case at all. They're primarily focused on cutting taxes for their donors who are the wealthiest people.
Yeah, and I mean, and the plan backs that up. I mean, it's just not complicated.
Yeah.
It's not like, I mean, it's such a bad trick. I watched a Penn and Teller's show last night where it's called like Fool Me Penn and Teller, or Fool Penn and Teller. And magicians get up there and try and do a trick that they haven't seen and they always know what it is, right? And I mean, this is such a bad, they're like, well, it's for the middle class. And then you look at it and you're like, well, 98% of the tax cuts go to the wealthiest 1%.
I know, but look, I agree that on the surface level, it seems like it's a really bad idea. It's very easy to look at the policy and move on with your life and realize that they're lying to you. But think about the platforms in which they have these discussions and think about how these platforms never delve into the policy details, right? And so, look, I'm not just saying this because I suspect CNN doesn't get into the details of the tax cut proposals. I know this because I listen and watch to CNN every day, and when these segments happen, they drive me insane. They'll have some GOP person come on and he'll say, no, we're just trying to cut the taxes for the middle class. CNN doesn't get into the details of what they're proposing, ever. And that's the thing that frustrates me. So it's actually a very smart strategy, because if you have a politician go on CNN and tell people, oh, middle class, we're gonna cut your taxes, and they're not gonna get into the truth and talk about what's really gonna happen, Americans are gonna love that. They're gonna be supportive of that.
Yeah, and of course, because since the beginning of time, every normal person would like more money. And,
right.
And every normal person looks at their paycheck and thinks, man, that sucks, right? Right. So it's an incredibly effective strategy, and it's for years and years and years put Democrats in a difficult position because they have to defend something that nobody wants. Everybody wants to keep their money. So you're right. Unless it's broken down and made clear, then it becomes a very effective argument. I'm just saying that when it is broken down, as sometimes it is, it's just such a bad trick. It doesn't hold up. It is a mile wide and 1/8 of an inch deep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're right, Anna. Unfortunately, the cable news complex is so incompetent, and maybe purposely so, that just look up basic facts about what percentage of tax cuts goes to the top 1% or to multinational corporations. And by the way, don't call it tax reform just because they call it tax reform. That you're helping their propaganda. You're supposed to be journalists, and you're supposed to figure out, is it actually reform or is it cuts? Now you can argue that it's reform if it is not overall cutting taxes. It's adding taxes on places and it's cutting taxes on other places. But this one doesn't. It's a $7 trillion tax cut. So don't feed into their propaganda. That's not supposed to be your job. I was talking to somebody off air today and they said, I'm beginning to think this is not tax reform. It looks like tax cuts. Of course, that's what it is. I mean, that's insanity. And when they talk about entitlement reform, do you think it's ever an increase of entitlements like Social Security and Medicare? No, entitlement reform means entitlement cuts. So call it what it is. And they won't do it, but it doesn't matter. There's this thing called the internet, and people can actually look it up now, which before TV had a monopoly, and they help to manipulate and lie to you. So now they're gonna get busted on this stuff. So now look, a lot of conservative Democrats are really corporate Democrats. They will also vote for these tax cuts, and they will pass these tax cuts. Otherwise, they're all going to lose their funding, and they cannot have it. That is the only thing they care about. But when they do, there is going to be hell to pay, because people, they coined this term, trickle-down economics. That is a terrible term, and they let it sit there for decades. And the Democrats, because they're part of the corrupt system, never really challenged it. When they go make the case, yeah, I just gave $7 trillion of tax cuts to the rich, but don't worry, it'll eventually trickle all over you. That is not a winning strategy politically.
Yeah, it's never happened. It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Yeah, and so have at it, Hoss. But I know that they need it to get money from their donors, and that's part of the corrupt system. But it is going to be their ultimate demise, because people are no longer happy to get trickled on, and it's not going to be a winning strategy. Okay, we got to take a break, right?
Yes, let's take a break. When we come back, an update on what's going on with North Korea. And then later on in the show, hopefully we get to the story about drone strikes under Trump, because it is bananas.
Yeah, and the North Korea story is potentially disastrous. It might seem like the same old yelling at each other, but there's actually a really important difference in what just happened today. We'll explain when we come back. All right, back on the Young Turks, Ben, Cenk, and Anna with you guys. We just played a little clip of my friend Lawrence O'Donnell for a second there. Tony R. Casillo 1 on YouTube Super Chat said, I think my boy O'Donnell is upset and stressed because of his contract. Have they come to an agreement on his future with MSNBC? I hope he will be okay. The Irish temper is real. Well, I don't know what you're talking about.
Someone in that control room is out of control.
I mean, if that's representative of Irish temper, then I want to be around Irish people all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, by the way, just to answer your question, they did. He got the contract. He's fine.
Okay, good. I felt bad for a second.
No,
that was like a couple months ago. He got
it. Okay.
Yeah,
he played it well.
Oh, he played it brilliantly. Great piece of politics by Lawrence O'Donnell in a good way. All right, Lentil Soup says, I hope the A-team is on more often. Thank you.
Thank you.
And D-More315 says, motherfucking Ben Mankiewicz. I've missed Ben on the show and on What the Flick. Love to see him back.
Yeah, I've been busy. Not intentional, just life.
So people come up to me, especially when I'm in New York, because I'm walking through New York and a lot of folks and yada yada. One guy came up and said, I was at a pizza shop and he's like, you're the guy from the Young Turks, right? I said, yeah. He said, okay, I don't watch you, but but he said, but I'm obsessed with What the Flick. So tell Ben, Matt, and Christy I said hi.
So this happens to me a fair amount now. I was at an airport and this family comes up to me, right? This guy stops me and I'm running, I'm late. I got there like 29 minutes before the flight, but I'm all like I do Clear now, where you do the little fingerprint readout, which I know is gonna come back to bite me one day.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna spend like 37 days in Homeland Security, solitary confinement because of it, but right now it's it's good. And so I make it and I'm walking, but I'm still like I'm walking fast to get to my gate. And so she goes, oh my God, I can't believe I'm seeing you at the airport, Ben Mankiewicz. And he says to his wife, this is Ben Mankiewicz, this is Ben Mankiewicz. And he says to his kid, he says, my son, his name's Ben too. And and the kid waves and he's like, I just would love watching you, love watching you. And I'm like, oh, that's so great. He goes, can we take a picture? I'm like, yeah, sure, take a picture. And I go, I'm so sorry, I gotta run, I got plane leaves in 16 minutes. I go, it's great, so you guys love old movies? Do you watch them together? And he goes, what? And I'm like, he goes, what? Young Turks? He said, love the Young Turks, TYT! Yeah.
It's funny. And then other people would just shout out random hosts. They'd be like, tell John, he's great. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'll tell Big John.
I was at Starbucks today with that Starbucks cup that I had on the set, and as I'm walking out of Starbucks, this guy was eating outside, and he stops his conversation and he goes, hey man, keep it up, keep up the good work, keep fighting. And I was like, that's not TCM, that's TYT. He never said it, but I knew.
He's like, keep up the good work, Dr. Zhivago. More people must know about him. He's a great doctor.
Maybe that was it.
Okay, all right, let's keep going.
He's a great doctor.
All right.
You've never seen that movie either.
No, I did. I was joking. It's a rare old movie I've seen, based on your suggestion. Anyway, yes.
All right. Tensions between the United States and North Korea are ramping up, considering Donald Trump's UN speech, where he had some pretty harsh words for North Korea and its missiles tests. Now, we're going to show you a little clip from his speech and then Kim Jong-un's response to it. Take a look.
Now, North Korea's reckless pursuit of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles threatens the entire world with unthinkable loss of human life. It is an outrage that some nations would not only trade with such a regime, but would arm, supply, and financially support a country that imperils the world with nuclear conflict. The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States is ready, willing, and able, but hopefully this will not be necessary.
Okay, it's always incredibly jarring for him to go from totally destroy North Korea and immediately follow it with Rocket Man. Like it's just, anyway. But
no, I got to jump in on that too. So actually the first part of that was fine. He was saying, what are you guys doing trading with North Korea when they endanger all these people? I actually totally agree with that. And I think it's incumbent upon us to pressure China, and I think they're endangering the world with their relationship with North Korea. So some of that tough talk is necessary. But he can't help himself. He has to take it over the top with, we will totally destroy you. That's so unhelpful. And I'm coming at it from a person who believes in tough talk, but that's not productive. That's counterproductive for reasons that we're going to explain. And then when you say Rocket Man, I can't ever think of Rocket Man without thinking Rocket Man, right? You sound like an idiot. You sound like a goofy kid. And you destroyed any kind of gravitas you had there with your tough talk by going Rocket Man.
Right, exactly. And so, look.
Do you know the words to Rocket Man?
Of course. All I know is Rocket Man.
That doesn't really happen in the song. I got to be honest.
It kind of does. It kind of does.
All right, so that speech happened, and following Trump's speech, he did put some action behind his words, meaning that he did target some of those countries, China primarily, that do trade with North Korea. And so Trump signed an executive order expanding the authority of the United States and the Treasury Department to target individuals, banks, and other companies that finance or facilitate trade with North Korea. So he essentially beefed up the sanctions that the UN had passed earlier. Now,
maybe he could start by not having the Trump Corporation make all the clothes in China. That might be one way to go.
Ooh, that's a great point. But again, when it's just sanctions and it is meant to put pressure on the regime, I agree with that move. That's not necessarily a bad move at all. It's going to get worse, but so if he just left well enough alone, the tough talk and the sanctions and the tough actions is not necessarily a bad thing. It might be a good thing because they do need pressure.
Yeah, it's not the first time we've talked tough on North Korea. Here we said we might wipe them off the face of the earth.
That's
a little different.
Yes. Yeah, that's the difference, and that has unfortunately escalated the situation even further. And now, for the first time, Kim Jong-un has released a statement in the first person. I know that doesn't sound like a big deal to people in the United States, but for North Korea, this is unprecedented. Usually the dictator doesn't do that. And so Kim condemned Trump's threat to totally destroy North Korea if the United States is forced to defend itself. And he declared that it had, quote, convinced me rather than frightening me or stopping me that the path I chose is correct and that it is the one I have to follow to the last. In a statement written in the first person, Kim also called Trump a mentally deranged US dotard who had
dotard, I think.
No, it's dotard.
Dotard. Yeah,
yes.
Dotard, who had denied the existence of and insulted me and my country in front of the eyes of the world. So he's even more enraged about this. And there's an interesting twist because now North Korea sees itself as defending itself rather than being the aggressor.
Right, sure. We managed to turn them a little bit into the victims.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this, according to every expert on North Korea, is totally unprecedented. Sorry, and this is very serious, but and the reason is it's one thing for the official state agency, which is what they do all the time, to do over-the-top statements. Oh, we'll destroy you, we'll have sex with your grandmothers, and whatever, right? We're going to take over, and they do that kind of nonsense all the time. And by the way, in a minute we'll get to hilarious put-downs of other US officials that they've done in the past. And don't think we're just gonna go past dotard. We're gonna explain what that is and how awesome that is. But okay, but they never have their leader actually make the statement because their leader is seen as a deity. So they look at him as almost a god in North Korea. So his father and his grandfather, for all of their belligerence, never made a personal statement like this. Kim Jong-un had never made a personal statement like this. For him to go on and say, no, now it's on and I'm never gonna back down, puts him in a corner where he can't possibly back down because then it's like God backing down. And
great.
And it's so, oh no, this has now gone to another level that is way worse.
Like DEFCON UN.
If you will. Right, sure. And so look, every once in a while when I see the different insults that are going back and forth, maniac, nut job,
dotard,
obviously a madman, all these whatever, mentally deranged, I can't tell which one is Trump and which one is Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, if you switched the quotes and just said who said this about the other, you'd be 50-50 on each one.
Yeah, and so if you had the North Korean leader saying outrageous, insane things, nobody's surprised by that. When you have the US leader saying the same things, oh no, that's different and terrible. So now they're talking about trying to prove that they could launch a nuke on an ICBM. So a long-range missile with a nuke on it, because they've done 6 different nuclear tests. They're all underground, which is where you're supposed to do them. First of all, don't do them, but if you do, they're supposed to be underground to contain the radiation. There's been no above-ground nuclear tests anywhere in the world for the last 37 years. The last time it happened was in China in 1980, and they tested it in the middle of the desert, and people were so outraged it hasn't happened since. And now, all of a sudden, North Korea is saying, yes, we might do one in the atmosphere, and we might try to put it on a long-range missile. Now, remember, they already fired a long-range missile over Japan, and they've shown some competence here, which has surprised me.
2 over Japan, I think.
Yeah, and so, but they're still North Korea. Imagine if they screw up a long-range missile test with a nuke on it, and it falls short. And it falls short in Japan, or South Korea, or God knows where. Then nuclear war. So we boxed them into a corner in a way that was thoughtless. We could have done it in a sophisticated way, and this is why when Bush and Trump say they don't do nuance, it's a terrible idea. It's basically saying I am stupid and I see the world in a way that is black and white, and when you do that, you set everyone up for disaster.
Yeah, but it's also, and it's also why the way Obama handled North Korea was far better. Yeah, we didn't solve the problem, neither is anyone else, but it was contained. We were never at this point. And it's also why, unbelievably, the Republicans managed to elect a guy substantially less qualified for this job than George W. Bush, because as little nuance as he did, for the most part, the people negotiating with North Korea took it relatively seriously, right? We actually, the diplomatic corps did not completely crumble. They didn't appoint the head of, his Secretary of State wasn't the head of ExxonMobil, a guy who has no interest in this job.
Yeah, and so one of the other things we keep saying is, oh, they can't fire a long-range missile with nukes on it, thereby goading them to try. Yeah, don't do that. That's a really bad idea. And so that's, look, one maniac and you could perhaps avoid nuclear war. Two maniacs on opposing sides, that's again a recipe for disaster. And then Kim Jong-un said about Trump, he's quote, a frightened dog barks louder. Okay, and Trump.
Kim Jong-un said that about Trump. That was a perfect example. Trump could have said that about Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, totally. We could play that game all day long. And look, when he would say things like that about Obama, Obama would be like, okay, whatever. Right. It's the North Korean guy, I don't care, right? In fact, you know what he called Obama? He called him a monkey. And Obama's like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm not going to nuclear war because you hurt my feelings.
Right.
Right? But Trump is not that guy. Trump's like, what did he say about me? Oh yeah, we'll totally destroy you, wipe off the map. And he's like, oh, okay, well, all right, let's get it on. This is just,
we're in a strange position where we're really praying that Nikki Haley saves the day.
Or Rex Tillerson. Oh my God.
Well,
anyway,
it would be of those two. It would be Nikki Haley.
Yes. All right. So dotard. What does it mean? A state or period of senile decay marked by decline of mental poise and alertness.
It's like
I feel like it's correct though.
It's an old.
Like
it's a crazy old person.
Yeah.
But I did you know it was a word?
No, I didn't.
No, I didn't know it was either.
Yeah.
I thought it was. I'm almost sorry that it's not pronounced dotard because it might. That having it enter the lexicon might have finally killed the other word that ends TARD. Everybody would have finally let that go as well. They should, and then we could just use dotard.
Unfortunately, it's specifically about older people.
Can you use the example that was given from the New York Times? Okay.
So New York Times went back in their archives to see how many times it had been used since 1980, and it's only 10 times out of all the articles they've ever written since 1980. And one of them said, it was a tale of a dotard husband cuckolded by his young wife.
Charles Pierce of Esquire, who's unquestionably worth following on Twitter, he used it about Trump in May. He called. They wrote about Trump. They called him a dotard. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's Kim Jong-un reads Esquire.
So now I'm going to give you more put downs by the North Koreans of our different leaders. And some people are like, dotard, kind of a little bit right. Okay, now some of course are outrageous and terrible, like calling Obama a monkey. They called Hillary Clinton, they said she looks like a primary school girl and sometimes a pensioner going shopping. I don't think either one of those things is true. I'm not offended by either one of those things. I just don't think it's quite a match.
Not really insults either.
Right. Yeah, you look like a schoolgirl. Okay.
You look like a pensioner, like somebody who worked hard is living on their pension and has to buy something.
Okay.
Yeah.
But John Kerry, they said, was a wolf with a hideous lantern jaw.
Oh my God.
Yeah, what kind of nailed it?
All right, come on.
Okay, sorry. And I like John Kerry, and George Bush, when he ducked the shoe that was thrown at him in 2008 in Iraq, they said he looked like a chicken soaked in the rain. I'm like, that's not bad either. They kind of have a facility with these insults.
God. Man, those reflexes though. That was an impressive video.
But he did kind of look like a chicken soaked in the rain.
That was probably the only time I was impressed by Bush. Anyway.
So, well, it's all fun and games until nuclear war starts. So
it's all fun and games until 1.6 million people get killed.
That's right. And so in all seriousness, guys, this is the issue that I think is by far the most important and why I look forward to a President